Sorry about that day I had to bail.
No, no problem.
We had a big, even $1 million customer we couldn't provision. So
Oh. Yeah, that's not good.
we had the check, but we couldn't encash it
Yeah.
until we provisioned.
Yeah, I hate incidents. They're like, it's one of the things I hate the most about being a software developer.
So I'm also the PM where I manage SLA and DevOps for my product. So
Okay.
that's all my life.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's fun.
I guess it's a kind of fun. Okay. Got that. We got that. Okay. How you doing today? Huh? This one's, yeah, this is a Hack Updates. I just forgot to put it away, I think. It's like a microphone thing.
Is that what you're recording?
Yeah, so like I can stand over there and people can still hear me. There were comments about that at the beginning. Okay. Cool, so we got that. Into attendance. Okay. I'll submit this later. Okay. I'll do it now. Update it. Okay. Oh.
I prefer folks like you. Yeah. Want to do that now, or you want to? Thank you. It was like about time. Do you need to computer up, or can you send me some slides, or what? My style is like. You know what? You waited too long. Oh, gosh. Yeah. If you put it up there, you can still keep it on the way. Sure.
I don't even get her.
Okay.
You don't have to also like trying to plug my stuff in. And
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Cool. Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what do you expect me to do with this?
Oh, yeah.
I stick it up in a bun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, surprisingly, you're really fine for being not being here for a year. And I'm like, yeah,
No, I think that's
certain
certain
age.
Things just. But I kept them for years
Cool.
longer than I felt like I should, just because I don't feel like doing it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's hard. That's a pain.
It's hard. I got rid of them. Hello, folks.
Yeah.
Literally why I'm doing this. I wanted to practice my public speaking. Thanks. Hi, so I'm going to take about 5 minutes to tell you guys about something I've been doing on Twitter, which is hashtag 100 days of code, in case you guys are interested. So what is it? The goal is to code for at least an hour a day for 100 days consecutively. You can work on any projects you'd like to throughout the challenge, which makes it kind of interesting. There's no one set list of projects you have to do. The goal is to make coding a habit and then to practice finding flow once you're working. So I know that building a habit, sometimes people say 21 days, sometimes people say 60 days, but by the time you finished out 100 days, you've really established it as a habit. So this is the official Twitter of 100 days of code. I wanted to show the picture so you guys note that there's an underscore before the 100, because there's actually one that's just at 100 days of code, which is not related, so don't follow that. This is the actual challenge. So why Twitter? I would say that Twitter provides a sense of public accountability and support. You might be more likely to do it if you put it out and mention it to other people. Also, it's nice to get likes and retweets and things from other people participating in the challenge. So it gives you kind of a sense of interaction and community building. You can get some automatic retweets. If you tweet anything using the hashtag 100 days of code, there's a bot that will retweet it for you. So you are guaranteed at least one retweet and one like, no matter what you do, which feels nice, frankly. So some guaranteed engagement there. I also find it easy to post updates on Twitter since you're limited to 280 characters. it's really just a quick update. I find it less stressful than trying to do blog posts or longer things like that. This is just really easy, post and go. This is my most popular tweet on 100 Days of Code. You'll note that it is not about coding at all. It's about taking off Saturday to go have sushi with my friends. And then a gif of the Lion King because it's a great movie. So I mentioned that to say that you don't have to always be posting about code. There are, like I just posted that about relaxing and taking a day off. Don't feel like it has to be an hour of code or you've somehow failed. You haven't. There are days I've done less than an hour of code and still counted it. There are days that I've said, oh, I was in class, that counts. So you could also do those as well. So how do you start? It's really whenever you're ready. There's no, I did a previous 21-day coding challenge that ran for a specific length of time. This is kind of whenever you want to start it. You feel free to just jump in and type your day one out. Yeah, just use the hashtag and you automatically become part of the challenge. So there's not a set time limit. This is an example of some people doing the 100 days of code. You can see there's people on like day 51, there's people on day 4, there's people who are doing, round 2, round 3. So you really get all kinds of different people coming together for this challenge, which I think is pretty neat. So what happens if you miss a day? That's totally okay. I've missed over a week before. Just get back into it. Don't feel like you have to go back to day 1, which is why I say feel free to pick up where you left off, because honestly, that's what I did. I was like, I don't feel like going all the way back to day 1. I'm just going to keep going from where I'm at. This is meant to help you learn to develop. It's not meant to make you feel bad. So that's why I say it's totally okay if you miss a day or more than one day. You can get back into it. It's not about shaming yourself for missing time. It's about, realizing that life happens and things come up, and you just kind of keep going anyway. So some additional resources. This is the official Twitter account, like I mentioned before. There is a 100daysofcode.com if you want to go check out the website. I just joined the Slack today. There's a channel that's actually designed for 100 days of code where people will give you help. Like there's a whole channel that's just learn JavaScript. So like we're not alone in trying to figure this stuff out. Also at the bottom is my Twitter handle. If you guys have Twitter, I would love to follow you and see more about your coding journeys and more about mine there too. So thanks for watching. That's my presentation. Thank you guys. Thanks, guys.
So if any of you guys want to give a presentation tomorrow, you're welcome to. I realize quite short notice, but have to offer. Nice work. So today we are going to be, we have these 2 days left in this module. And we're going to kind of be reviewing a bunch of things that you guys had asked about, a bunch of things that you guys had questions about throughout the module. So I planned both of these days, but if during the course of today more things come up, feel free to mention them to me in Slack or just write them down somewhere or get them to me. I can put some stuff together. I can add more to the lesson tomorrow if more things come up, but this is at least what I have for today. I might do a little improv at the end depending on how it goes here. So day number 9, not module 5 related at all, but programming related for sure. 2 things. A couple common JavaScript errors that you guys have been running into over and over again. I wanted to kind of talk about, ensure that you understand what they mean, and then talk about how you go about solving those problems. And the other thing is reading API documentation. And I might do a little bit at the end about kind of taking some of those principles and using them to write your own API documentation. So sounds good? Mm-hmm. Okay. So first up, the good old something is not defined. How many of you guys have run into this one?
These are all my old friends.
Yes. So typically what this means is you're trying to reference a variable that was never defined. So if you have some code like I don't know, maybe something like you're trying to use a variable b, but you never actually set up b. You never did var b is equal to something, or let b is equal to something. We just have b in there. You're trying to use b. JavaScript doesn't know where b came from. It's just saying like this b, it came out of nowhere and it throws an error for you. So let's do a little demonstration of this. If I go into JavaScript console
and make this go over here. I do something like, I don't know, maybe like console.log b. B is not defined. Makes sense. B was never defined earlier in the code. But I bet some of you guys are probably thinking right now, I've run into this error when I've had all my variables defined. What's going on? Well, what that usually means is it means for some reason what JavaScript thinks you're doing is you're referencing a variable it's not defined. Now, this can often be a clue, but I would say the most, when I've seen this on your guys' programs, the thing that has been the most common is you have something like this example down here in the corner, which is something like var b is equal to my string, like this. And you get something like my string is not defined. Or something like key my string. My string is not defined. What do you guys see what's going on there? Does anyone have any guesses as to why this is throwing an error?
No quotation marks.
No quotation marks, exactly. So I put those quotation marks around my string, and now it's a string. If you don't have those quotation marks, what it thinks is going on here is it thinks my string is a variable. It thinks that you have a variable called my string that hasn't been defined before. So because of that, it tries to define that variable and it can't. And it says this variable doesn't exist. What's going on here? I'm going to throw an error. So that's one place where this will happen. I guess, does that make sense? In addition, if you have a case, maybe I saw this a couple times as well, but a little less common, where maybe you have multiple words like hello world. You're going to get something else, but that's because it's parsing this, and what it sees is it sees variable space variable. It's like, wait a second, two variables on the right-hand side, what's going on there? And it just gets confused. So in general, remember your quotes is very important around strings, very important. And just as a review, you don't need quotes around keys and objects. It's like the one big exception here. It'll work. There's nothing against doing that, but you don't need them. That is perfectly fine as well. So I think, yes.
You should go back up where it says anonymous. They're trying to give you a hint where you go wrong.
Yes. So this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow, reading stack traces. And the quick little 10-second summary is yes, but stack traces in the JavaScript console are very poor. So what this is telling you, in fact, is that there is a function that is defined somewhere that on line 1, character 9 has this error, but we don't know exactly where that function is. Yeah.
I got one. Remember,
Yes.
I said, did I define it as const and it's supposed to be var?
Yep, we're going to talk about that next.
And I got the
You got
same
like this sort of thing?
variable not defined or something. Didn't I? I'm pretty sure.
Let me do this next one.
Okay,
If that doesn't address your problem, then we'll talk about it in a second. But
I've got many attempts. Errors.
anybody else have any cases they've run into this you want to talk about? Any sort of variables not defined? Oh yeah, Jaquay.
My favorite is when I get undefined and the right answer, like somewhere else.
Yes, like
And where I'm like upset about this undefined thing, and then I don't even notice that I actually do have the right answer somewhere else.
like you get something like this. Actually, sorry, I'm coming up with an example on the fly here. Maybe something like
I think the card game had a lot of that. The like JavaScript card game thing. Like, oh, you
something like
undefined,
this,
but
where I run an expression and I get undefined down there. Is that what you're talking about?
something like that.
So
Like why you meant.
yeah, the way that JavaScript console works, you run some code, and when you run it, it always shows you the value that what you just ran returns. It turns out that often when you have a value that it's not really something you deal with in JavaScript, like a value you don't really ever get the return out of, it's often undefined. In this case here, if you notice how they have this little arrow with the dot in it like this before, so like you have this little arrow this way, which is like your prop. This is the arrow the other way. This is the return value from this expression. In effect, the return value of that whole expression is undefined, which is a little goofy to think about. But in effect, this is a value you never.
it's a value you never really have to worry about using. It's something that JavaScript, the console prints to you because it always has to print a return value from that thing, but the return value is just nothing. So it just prints undefined. Does that make sense? Do you want me to get into it a little bit deeper? Okay. Yes. Okay. So let's do a better example here. Something like, okay, let me show this again. So this function here, I made this add function here. It takes two parameters, x and y. I did c is equal to x plus y, and I have this variable c, so we'll store it up into that variable. But the thing to note here is this add function doesn't return anything. Its return value is not defined. It's turns out it's undefined. So if I run, I already declared that. Let's do that again. Okay, so I made that. Now I'm going to call add 1, 2. What do you guys think is going to happen? Any guesses?
3 to show up.
3 to show up? Well, let's see. Undefined. So look at this guy. I stored this value into C, but I never return anything from this function. If you don't return anything from a function in JavaScript, it returns undefined by default. It's like the else case return always. Like it will always return undefined. So in this case, this expression didn't return anything, so it printed out undefined. Now, let's say I change up this this code here, and instead I do stick down here return C. Well, don't have that left there because I can only define that once. But I put return C at the bottom. Now if I call add 1, 2, it's going to give me 3 because it's returning that. The return value from this function is no longer undefined. Does that make more sense?
Because you told it to give you something.
Exactly.
Not just do it and keep it.
Exactly. So with this version of this function, or not that version of this function, the version without the return, I'm sorry. This version of this function, there's no return in this function. There's no place for a value to come out of the function. I mean, I'm putting something in that C variable, but I'm not ever returning something from that function. And because of that, the return value that a function has by default, if you don't do anything, you don't return anything, is going to be undefined. Or like another example, if I were to have something like function foo, and foo just has nothing in it, and now I call foo, I'm going to get back undefined. Because I never return anything from foo, it never takes any parameters, so it doesn't do anything. It's a no-op function is what they call it. But in general, I'm not getting anything back out of that function. Does that help more?
I mean, that definitely makes sense why that's undefined. There's like nothing in there.
Yeah. This
you define things there, and it's still like, meh.
Yeah. So in here, I have this inside of the function.
Yeah.
But I'm not returning anything here. Like, let's say I were to do something like.
So that's just like the way it is.
Yeah, like I did something like 1 + 2 in here. In that case, I'm doing some math, but I'm not really putting that value into anything. So therefore, when I do that and I run add, like, I'll do 4 or 5 this time, undefined. Well, because there's stuff inside of this function, but it's never making its way out of the function.
Do you always want it to return, or are there times when you don't care?
There are times when you don't care, for sure.
It's just part of like many step calculation.
Yeah, if you're at the very end of something, like you're in like a chain of operations and you're at the very end, you often don't need to return because that's the last thing you're doing.
And you don't really care about the stuff.
Yeah, the stuff in the middle is probably gonna. Yeah, you don't really. That's a good way of putting it. You don't really care about the stuff in the middle. Yeah.
I mean, like, if, for example, just a simple example, if you want to take the average of 5 numbers, you don't really need to know what all 5 numbers added together are.
Exactly.
You just want the average at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that average is returned from the functions that'll come out. Yeah, exactly.
If you called your C variable after the first function, though, even though you didn't have your return, you can still call C and have that.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Let me show that. 100% you can. So if I do something like, let me find that again here, like let's see, and then something like this, and then go add 1, 2, yeah, and C is 3. But it just never was returned from add. It's still stored in C, but it just there's never a return C or a return anything from this add function. That's really the big differentiator there. So Anyway, I'm going to jump on to the next one here.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah.
Do you mind terribly if I turn some of the lights down? Sometime when I had a terrible headache, probably mine.
I wouldn't care.
It's really bright here too.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I'm normally the person at work who comes in first and leaves the lights off, and other people turn them on. Yeah.
Especially these.
Yeah, the fluorescent lights in this building are very questionable, but it's neither here nor there. Yeah. Okay. Good old type error assignment to constant variable. Ooh, yay. So, I'm imagining in module 4, you were taught that about constant, let, and var. And kind of probably roughly the difference between them all. Who can explain to me like what const does or what var does? Who can explain to me like what one of those does? I guess. Anybody?
So var can be changed
Mhm.
like over and over again. And const can't.
Const you define a single time and it's that value forever. Can't change it. Yeah, exactly. And for all intents and purposes, let and var are the same thing. In practice, they're a little different, but in all intents and purposes, they are the same thing. Now, what Caitlin just said, const, you can't change it. Well, if you try to change a const value, you're going to get this error here. Type error, assignment to constant variable. So let me show that. If I have something like const a is equal to 1, and try to go a is equal to 2, I can't do that. Can't change a. Now, this often comes up with you guys when you take code I've written, or what someone else has written, but at least for me, at least when I've been in class, it's mostly been code I've written. You've copied it into your own stuff, and you've run it on your own. And you've run into this, and you've gotten a little confused. And the reason why is, as a JavaScript developer day to day, I'm trained to use const all over the place. Because when I use const all over the place, it's like it provides some guarantees for my application that's very nice. That being said, when you're playing around, it often can be difficult. Because if in something like the JavaScript console, you're very quickly iterating. You're very quickly changing things. And here, if I want to like just maybe I decide, oh, actually, I didn't want to set a equal to 1. I wanted to set it equal to 2. Well, if I did make a constant variable in the console, I can't do that. So I would recommend you use either let or var in the JavaScript console. And var is actually slightly more preferred. I'm not going to go into why. But really, either of them is more preferred. So I would say, in general, for code that you're playing around with, avoid const. In code you're writing in like a web page or something like that, feel free to use it. But I would say probably at the point you guys are at, it doesn't really matter if you go with const or not. You can probably just use var and let everywhere and be fine with it. It does make it a little bit easier for you guys. So like for example, let me see if I can find some code that has this sort of thing. Something way before, something up here somewhere. Yeah, like this. See, I put a const in there because that's what I'm trained to do. So if you see that sort of thing, and you run into errors with const, you want to flip that const over to something like a var or a let. And the other big thing, if I do like const a is equal to 1, and then I try to reassign it, I'm going to get that error. But in order to kind of clear this, so that I can actually use a again, I have to reload the page. Once I reload the page, I can now do something like var a is equal to 1, and that's fine. But if I didn't reload the page, so I had like a const a is equal to 1, and then I did a var is equal to a equal to 1, that's not going to work. Because I've already defined it as a constant, and I need to be able, in order to change it around, I need to reload the tab first. Does that make sense?
So if you did var a equals 1 and then you change that to var b equals 1, then it will take on the last thing that you assigned to var?
The variable will take on the last thing you assign. Yes.
Right.
In this const, if you do it multiple times, it will just throw an error the second, the third, the fourth time, the nth time. Yeah. So I would say for any sort of playing around in the JavaScript console, avoid const. It's gonna make your life harder. So anyway, that's that. Okay, here we go. So next up, cannot read property something of undefined. This one is a very classic JavaScript error. How many of you guys have run into this one?
Yes. Okay, so what this actually means is it means you are trying to access this property on the value undefined. Now, we've talked about undefined a couple times so far, even today, but I'm guessing you guys probably haven't really been explained what undefined exactly is yet. Is that correct?
Isn't it a value with no properties?
Correct, it is a value with no
I
properties.
think I read it.
Okay, so I'm going to say some stuff now that might be slightly technically incorrect, but conceptually this is how I think of it. So I'm really more saying this that anybody listening who knows what they're talking about, feel free to tell me how I'm wrong later on. But I think this is about how it works. So in how I understand it, in JavaScript, every single value has a prototype, except for two, null and undefined. And this is the thing that probably someone's going to tell me, oh, no, you forgot about that. And I'll probably be like, yeah, oh, yeah, I forgot about that one. But I think the only values that don't have prototypes are null and undefined. Now, you might ask, why are there these two kind of empty values? It's kind of strange there's the two of them. You'd think there'd just be one, and that would just be every single time there's an empty thing, it's set equal to this, and it's easy. Well, because JavaScript is a language that's evolved over time, and there's lots of little complexities, and people thought it was a good idea at one point and then decided it wasn't. It's one of those things where it's happened over time, and because it happened over time, we're kind of stuck with it. And it turns out there's actually also a third value that means kind of an empty value, not a number, NaN. You might have run into that one too. But NaN is actually, it does actually have a prototype. But you guys, I heard you guys were talking about object-oriented stuff. So you know a decent amount, it sounds like, about prototypes and how object has a prototype, that's where all its methods come from and all that sort of thing, and how it inherits and stuff like that. I'm going to kind of assume you roughly got that sort of stuff. So something like a number. If I made var a is equal to 5. Well, if I didn't set it equal to const one before. But there we go. Var is equal, a is equal to 5. If I go a dot, there's a bunch of methods on this thing. And these are all on its prototype. So if I go to, well, I think it's actually that. But if I do some, or better, I'll go number dot prototype. Got all these sorts of methods that exist on a number. Now, for I believe any JavaScript object except for null or undefined, you can do something like this. Something like a regex. That's a great example. A regex has a bunch of methods on it. Too. Strings. I mean, we could go down the list. And I'm not going to go down the whole list, but they all have methods. Now, imagine I did this for null. Let's start with null.prototype. Yeah, it's already mad. The reason why is null is a special value. Null doesn't have a prototype. It's just null. There's no methods on it. It's just a pure value. There's nothing you can really do with null. Now I'm going to do the same thing with undefined. And notice we get our cannot read property something of undefined. Little hint. This is coming up soon. Undefined. There's no sort of properties, or there's no sort of prototype that exists on it. Now this is where. This is, I guess, the first piece, that undefined and null are kind of special. But the other piece comes in with objects. This is where you most often run into this sort of problem. Either objects or arrays, but more oftenly objects. Let's say I've got a variable, var a is equal to, let's make an object with foo, bar, and hello world. Good test data here. And I do something like a.foo. I'm going to get bar. Or I do something like a foo, I'm going to get bar. This should look relatively familiar to you guys, I should imagine. What if I did something like, I tried to get the key maybe test out of a? What do you think it's going to return? What do you think it's going to print below here as the value it logs out? Any guesses? Let's just do it.
A.test.
Yep, a.test, undefined. There's no key in this object that maps to undefined. Or that maps to, there's no key test in the object. So if an object doesn't have a key in it, it just returns undefined. That's just kind of how the rules of objects, how they work. Now, Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so you got that. Now I'm going to make this a little more complicated. I'm actually going to add another object in here. I'm going to make hello map to another object, and I'm going to have it be, actually, I'm going to change hello to Baz, just so I can use hello and world in here. But in effect, this is very similar to some other stuff we've done in this class so far. We've got an outer object, we've got the key foo that maps to bar, we've got the key Baz that maps to this object, and the key hello that maps to world. This should probably look pretty familiar to you guys, I would imagine, this sort of way you can nest objects like this. Now, if we do a.foo, we get bar, exactly what you'd think. If you do a.baz, what do you get? Any guesses? I mean, I would guess you can probably, yeah. a.baz, you get the object. If I do a.baz.hello, I'm going to get world. Yeah, so you might be thinking, okay, Ryan, where's the error come in here? This is all too good. Like, you haven't gotten into the error part yet. And I haven't, you're right. So let's mix this up a little bit. Let's say I thought there was a key in here, Ryan. Like, I was just thinking there was a key Ryan in this thing. So I do a.ryan, I get undefined. Okay, sure, whatever. Let's say I thought the key Ryan mapped to an object, and the object was something like, I don't know, like module 5. I'll put quotes around this just to be consistent here. So this isn't actually in the object, it's in a comment, but I thought there was a key Ryan in there. So what I would do, maybe thinking there's that in there, is I want to get this 5 here. I want to get inside of this A object, I want to get the Ryan key, and inside of that value of the Ryan key, I want to get the module key. So what I do is I do something like a.ryan.module, and cannot read property module of undefined. What's going on? Well, if you remember from before, a.ryan is undefined.
And then
Doesn't have the property module. Because in effect, what we're doing here is this. And that doesn't work. So the lesson here is whenever you have a sort of property lookup where you're going more than one level deep, you always need to check to make sure the keys before exist. So if I were doing this, I would need to do something like if I'm not sure this exists or there's questions about whether it exists, I need to do something like this. Oops. If I can spell. I need to have some sort of logic here that says, does this key exist? Is this key not undefined? And if it's not, if it's not undefined, I can get it. If it is undefined, I can't get it. Now, in practice, this sort of thing you only have to do when you have an object you don't know the structure of, or you're unsure about how exactly it's laid out. But it turns out that that happens more than you'd think. But usually you do have an object you can kind of somewhat depend on the structure of. So if you know the structures of the object will always have a key and will always have another key in it, and you know the structure all the way down, you don't have to worry about this. But if you run into this sort of error, you know the key here that's listed, if you go one back, that's the one that's undefined. That's the one that doesn't exist. So effectively, that's how you can kind of use this error message in particular to work backwards. Does this make sense? Okay. Hopefully this helps you guys out when you're running into this in the future. In a similar sort of way, you can run into this with arrays as well. This doesn't happen as much to me, but I think it's worth mentioning since we're here. If I have B, and B is 1, 2, 3, and I get B4 is not going to be undefined. And if I try to get a key in there, that's not going to work either. So effectively, anything that evaluates to undefined, you have this problem, where if you expect it to exist and it doesn't exist, you can run into issues. So that's this one. Okay, so this is basically what I just said. I put together some slides on this. So those were the 4 error messages I came up with. Now, you guys for sure have more. Do you have any you want to talk about now, or do you want to save those for maybe tomorrow or some other time? Yeah, I might have to quickly look it up if I don't know it off the top of my head, but I think hopefully this will guys will help you throughout the rest of the course is my hope. This between this and tomorrow, understanding errors is pretty helpful. Okay, I'll give it 10 more seconds here. If you guys can't find it in that amount of time, we can talk about it afterwards, or maybe tomorrow or some other time. I'll be around, even though I won't be teaching. I'll be around, so feel free to get a hold of me. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at this next piece, reading API documentation. So I gave you guys last week that New York Times assignment, and I was talking about this yesterday. I think it's a pretty valuable assignment. It's an assignment that if you do, it'll give you something that you can put on your resume that says basically everything you've touched up until now in careers in code, all the way from HTML, CSS, beginning into stuff JavaScript, network stuff. Between all that stuff, you can make something. You can make something that is something you could give to somebody, and they could say, oh, this person kind of understands how all these things fit together. That's pretty nice. That's a good thing to have on a resume, especially if you're kind of starting out. But the thing you guys are running into the most trouble with, it turns out, was understanding the API documentation, looking through that API documentation and figuring out exactly what it all means, kind of putting it together. And to be honest, it's a pretty difficult skill. It's something that I've figured out just through a lot of trial and error. But I'm going to give you guys some tips roughly in the way I normally approach these things. And I think I'm going to try to, near the end, spin some of these tips into, if you have to write documentation, which trust me, you will, how exactly you go about doing that. And maybe we'll even talk about some tips about writing comments too, because that kind of jumps into it as well. So the first tip, when you're looking at API documentation, look for a section that's labeled Getting Started. It usually has two things in it. The first thing is it has a bunch of like broader overview concepts that the API is going to deal with. And it answers a lot of questions like, do I need a token to use this API? There are special headers I need to provide. What sort of resources exist? Maybe something like, is there a recommended tool they want me to use to make requests to it? Or do they provide an SDK so I don't even need to make requests? Like they provide code to do all that stuff for me. Things like that. So I would say always start at the Getting Started section. And when you open it up, look on the navigation. You'll probably see something like Getting Started or something like Introduction or kind of like a high-level overview. That's really where you want to start. So typically what I do, and this is just my preference, is I scan it kind of quickly, and then I read a little bit more in depth. So when I say scan it quickly, I mean like scan it, look for terms that maybe I should know about, and like write them down or take note of them, and then look through it again, and then like expand on those concepts if I've noticed them. And I can't emphasize how much looking at this sort of Getting Started section is really helpful. So after I've done that, and I've kind of have sort of broad ideas about what the API does, I then start to look at the navigation. I look for words like resources, or endpoints, or routes, or words that kind of imply action I can take with this API. Maybe if I'm looking at like a MDN, a place where I'm looking at an API that is an HTTP API, like has a bunch of functions that I need to call. I'm going to look for words like functions or methods or things like that. But in general, those sorts of words you want to look for. And if you see something like resource, that's going to imply CRUD, or doing something like posts and gets and puts, and that sort of thing where you're modifying a resource like that. And we touched on that briefly last week. Next module, you're going to get way more into that, and that's kind of the direction you're going to be going. And if you do find something like resource, then start to look for resources that relate to what you're trying to do. Like if you want to, for example, get a list of popular books at the New York Times, maybe you want to look for a resource that relates to books, or maybe they'll have like some sort of searching-based resource, which would be kind of weird, but I have run into that before. If you something like endpoints or routes, look for the URL in the endpoint or route that kind of matches roughly what matches kind of what you're trying to do. Like if you want to search for books, maybe you want to look for something like /book/search, and maybe it would be something like a get or a post, I would guess. Like maybe you're you're retrieving data, so it might imply a get, maybe. Yeah, that would make sense. Maybe like a get. So, and the last piece here is this sort of stuff, like API documentation. You're not going to understand everything you read, and even though you might think like, oh, Ryan understands everything, Ryan knows all this stuff. I don't know any. Like I figure this stuff as I go along as well. Like it's not like no one knows all this sort of stuff. Everyone's figuring it out as they go. When I look at a new API, it takes me a good amount of time to get familiar with it. I have to familiarize myself with how they do things, their own little opinions, their own little headers, their own little ways of like specifying tokens, and maybe they do things weird like putting a body on a get or something weird like that. There are some people who do that, which is quite weird, but things like that where I need to get myself familiar with how they do it. And you're going to run into cases where you don't get it, and that's fine. And ask people for help or Google. So 3 more tips. We still can't find what you're looking for. What you're trying to do might actually take multiple requests to accomplish. If you're trying to do something complicated and you're looking for one request you can make that will do the whole thing, then you're often going to run into cases where you have to do, there's multiple steps required. You haven't quite been specific enough. So if you suspect that what you're trying to ask it to do is a relatively large thing, like maybe, I don't know, like returning let's say like doing a calculation, like, or no, maybe something like uploading data and then doing a calculation on that data. Like you expect that to be done in one operation. Like I give it the data, I get in the response some calculation results. That could make sense. You might run into, though, that there's actually 2 steps required. There's an upload step, and then maybe you get back like some sort of entry that then you have to query, you have to ask to say like, is this entry done calculating? And you ask, and you make a request to say, is this done calculating? And then it says no, and you make it again, it says no, and you make it again, it says no, and you make it again, it says, oh yes, I finally am done calculating, and it gives you back the result. So I guess the moral of this is, if you can't find something for exactly what you want, start at the beginning of what you're trying to do, make your task smaller, and then try to find something in particular for that smaller task, like an endpoint or a resource or something that relates to that, and kind of go down that path. Also, there's always the good fallback of just reading the documentation from the top to the bottom and just like getting yourself as familiar with it as possible. And often you'll realize that you're just like in the process of doing that, you'll discover what you thought like something was called, they call it something else. Like you might call it a token and they call it a key. And because you've called it a token, you're searching for token everywhere and you're not seeing it. But through reading the whole thing, you realize, oh, they're using this thing called a key, which is what I understand to be a token. So key, okay, I'm gonna talk about this key thing. I'm gonna search for a key. So you can get a lot of insight from that. It kind of takes this amount of time, but you can. And then of course the last really good fallback, use Google. I was gonna do a lesson about good ways to search for questions or good ways to look online for sorts of good ways to like ask the computer questions, good ways to like figure out, look up like something on Stack Overflow or something like that. I found that's a very hard thing to explain. So in the amount of time I had to prepare, I couldn't really go through my whole thought process to figure out the best way to explain it. But I'm thinking I might try to ask Jesse for some time at the very end of the class to talk about some other things maybe. So if that happens, I might do a lesson on that. So I guess, what are your thoughts on this? I realize I just chucked a bunch of like, probably what seems kind of like study skills at you guys. And I'm probably not qualified for that at all. But what are your thoughts? Does this sort of stuff make sense? Are these the kind of approaches you've been taking? Okay.
I think it just takes a lot of practice, because at first I would read these things and be like, I have no idea what that means. And now I don't really know what it means, but I do understand pieces of it. So
Yeah, definitely.
my guess is just the more you do it.
Yeah. I've got a couple more up here that are more specific to a specific endpoint in general. Like you found the endpoint you want, and now we're going to talk of like, how do you figure out exactly what to type in to make the fetch or the curl or the postman request work? I think that might end up being more helpful for you guys, especially with this New York Times bit here. So let's talk about that. Oh, did you have something you were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if it would be possible for me to just give you like 3 of the possible requests that can be made through my bus time developer APIs since I have it here. So I have a reference section here, and it describes all the possible requests that can be made with the API. I'm just going to read you the top 3.
Okay.
The
Do you
first
think this
one-
would be better to do afterwards, or do you want to do it right now?
Well, I mean, I thought it was relevant. That's why I asked you if it was okay. I mean, if you don't think it's relevant, you can
No.
let me know. I just wanted to just give you like the 3.
I briefly glanced at I saw briefly what your that API document before. They do some things a little funky. So I would say let's talk about it afterwards. And if things come up that are relevant, I'll mention them in class.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So in particular with one endpoint, if you found the endpoint you want, like for example, this New York Times exercise where I've given you the right endpoint, you can trust me that it's the right endpoint because I've used it and it works. Really, the first thing you need to do is you know the sorts of fields you need with fetch. You need a method, you need a URL, you need some headers, you need a body, and the headers and body are kind of optional. But the key thing, you need a method and you need a URL. So you know what methods look like. You have a get, post, put, delete, all that sort of stuff. So if you take that sort of endpoint section, you just scan for those things. You know what a URL looks like. You know kind of what headers look like. They're probably going to be in a table or something, or maybe in a list. Or body, you look for that sort of thing. Looking for that sort of data, you know what it looks like in that text is often helpful. And then also reading the endpoints documentation, reading it close. Oh, I guess I kind of already said that, but yeah. Okay, yeah. So then the last 2 things, I have 2 little cheats for you guys that I think you're going to really like. So a lot of API documentation provide hints for you. And what they'll do is they'll give you the documentation reading bit that you have to go through and understand. And they'll also give you often an example. And those examples are often gold. That's where you figure out more about how it works sometimes in the documentation itself, especially if the documentation is questionably written. One of the reasons I taught you guys about curl is for this exact reason. You will run into API documentation where the examples they will give you are in curl. Because curl is the way that you often see these sorts of requests written out in text. Because it's a very concise text format, something a lot of developers understand. It's something you can just paste into a terminal and hit enter and see it work. And it's something that something like Postman can ingest. You can import a curl and make it work in Postman that way. You don't even have to enter everything. So it's often a really helpful communication format. And many API documentation providers, they will write out the curl command for you. They'll say, here's the documentation, here's the curl. Of course, if this is an HTTP API, but I'm assuming that for the notion of this explanation. But they'll write out the curl for you. And you can take that curl, you can copy it, you can paste it into your terminal and hit enter and see it work. Or you can take that curl and you can see okay, there's the header piece, there's the method piece, you can get all the pieces out of it and plug them into any other thing. You can plug them into Fetch or plug them into Postman and make it work. So I've got an example of this. One of the best API providers, in my opinion, they've done a seriously good job, is Stripe. Now, I'm guessing you guys probably haven't heard of Stripe. Or if you have, it's maybe because you're into Silicon Valley newsy type of stuff. But Stripe, they're a payment processor. I can do another API documentation, not their marketing site. So Okay, cool. So you can do things like Stripe, like uploading having a customer give them their credit card information, and you can charge their credit card or set up recurring billing. And it's really nice if you're a company and you're trying to have some sort of payment set up for earn your company money, and you can do it through Stripe, and they make it really easy. So there's that. But more importantly, if you take a look here, got this nice navigation on the side. We've got stuff about authentication, and it talks all about it. It says all the different ways you can have what they call keys or tokens, and then they give you a curl here. And when I see this, you can even see they've kind of made it dark, so it kind of stands out. But I would say I almost would prefer having this almost more than preferring this. Having this means I have something that works that I can try out. Or if I go down to maybe an actual endpoint, like resources. I mentioned resources, so that's how they kind of refer to the concepts in their system. Customers, here are all the different endpoints. Right, let's say I want to create a customer. Oh, there's a curl. This curl says I need to make a request to this URL. I want to specify these parameters in the body, and this is what the response is going to look like. So I can click to copy that. I can paste it into the terminal and hit enter, and probably see this response and see if that works here. That would be pretty amazing. But usually, Stripe's pretty good, so I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, and then we get this. So like that's really cool. Oh wait, what? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so we get this. We get like a response. So now we have something that works, and we can be like, okay, maybe we talked about that -v flag when we were talking about curl. So I can add -v, and it'll print out all the request information. I can say, okay, these are all the headers it's sending. And here's all this stuff here. Here's my authorization information and stuff like that. But in general, like this sort of thing is really helpful. Does that make sense? So look for that. Something else, and this comes in on the New York Times API, a lot of these services will have a demo or try it online functionality. It's very similar to the curl thing, but instead of being a curl command you can copy and paste, it's like a form. And you type in all the stuff into the form and you hit submit, and it makes the request and it shows you the output there. And typically they're done so you can take the API you're looking at on the documentation on maybe the left side, and on the right side you can give it a demo, try it out before you actually implement it into your application. But what I love about this, and I'm going to go to Trello because they do it this way. Is, yeah. So they give you this try it button. And what you can do is you can go over here and you can enter information. And you can click try it. Oh, I need a key. Well, OK, I'm going to do it in another provider in a second that I don't need that for. But I can do that, and I can hit try. And what the browser will do is it'll make a request using fetch, using all the proper parameters to the site, and come back with the response. And because it used fetch, I can open up DevTools, and I can take a look at that request. I can see the request the try it functionality made. And because their request was successful, if I just copy their request in my code, it's going to be successful in my code too. So this is also incredibly helpful. But these sorts of examples make this sort of thing a lot easier. So the sort of thing that I especially want to drive home, though, is this this try it online functionality. This exists in the New York Times API documentation.
I just got it to work finally. Remember that day I was like freaking out?
Just got it to work. Nice. Well, anyway, like that's it's like if you go onto their API documentation and you take a look at that try it now functionality, and you put in, I think there's one field on that, you enter it and you hit try it now, you're going to get a response. If you take a look in DevTools, you'd be surprised that the request you need to make is basically just there, and you can pull it out. Now, you could get all that information from reading the documentation, but something like this sort of thing, it makes it a lot faster. So anyway, those are probably, that's really what I have to say about reading API documentation. And then on top of that, also, it just takes a lot of practice. You'll get good at it eventually. But just thinking through, these are kind of the techniques I often use myself. So what do you guys think? Any comments?
I think it's just going to be lots and lots and lots of practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trial and error.
But that's software development in general, you know? Lots and lots and lots of practice. So that's pretty much what I put together for today. Now, my thinking for the rest of the class was my goal, this might be a little ambitious, my goal would be by tomorrow, by the end of class tomorrow, for you guys to all have that New York Times thing working. That's pretty ambitious, but I think it could happen. I think it could happen. So what I would say is the rest of the class, use what we just talked about with API documentation and understanding errors, and use this sort of stuff to go through the New York Times API documentation. And I would like to see, now, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but I would like to see you guys to figure out the requests you need to make by the time we're done with class. So know exactly the fetch you need to run in order to make a request to the New York Times and get back the JSON response. What do you guys think about that? You think that's doable?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's tryable. It's
Yeah,
a
very good.
defined task.
So you
So
said no, the fetch command you need to run in order to get the JSON response.
Exactly, so just the fetch command, you have to type it in DevTools.
Right.
When you enter, you take a look at the network pane in Chrome, and you can see your requesting ID, and see the response. When you click on response, you see a bunch of JSON that looks like the data that New York Times returns. So I'll be walking around like normal.
Well,
but yeah. Feel free to work in groups too, by the way. Like this doesn't necessarily have to be like a one-on-one thing.
And this is an actual assignment that you want us to post into CIC.
So I'm gonna make a Google Classroom.
narrative.
So the assignment for tomorrow.
But I didn't like it.
So I would say that more importantly, it's that I would really like to see this assignment completed, because this assignment's done kind of help anchor a lot of the stuff that's done throughout the class. Yeah, and you have something you can find right.
I don't remember it that well.
Depending on how time goes, maybe at the end of the class, I'm going to touch on a couple more things. But I'd say let's start this for a bit for now. See how it goes.
Something Joey did that I think everybody really appreciated was to review. He made just a spreadsheet of all the things we had kind of worked on.
Yeah.
Does anybody think that would be helpful? Just as like,
Like it was like vocabulary and stuff.
yeah,
I
and then
maxed
through all the
maxed it
different
too,
tabs.
yeah.
Yeah.
I maxed it too, and that helped.
Okay.
Like going over the terms and.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's a good review, and
Yeah.
it's nice to have it in one place and then you can look at it.
Yeah. I'll see what I can do about that tomorrow.
Yeah, we just did it like in class, kind of
Okay.
together, right? Well, Joey was more like all the different JavaScript things he was putting, but with Max, we were just asking him words that we didn't really know that everybody uses all the time. And he just tells what they were.
I might start off and write out some stuff on my own, but I'll maybe we can have a little bit of the end of the class tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. Yeah. See if I can do that.
I don't even remember.
So I got it to work in
Let me post the assignment in the Slack channel just so you guys all have it again.
I think should be able to find it, but I'll just post it again to be sure.
Thanks.
Cool.
I'll show you kind of what's going on. Okay, so the first, I'll go back to the main script, right? So the first thing- it gives me this.
This is my whole assignment, but it's being done today.
Yeah.
It gives me this really helpful error.
Yeah.
So then the second time I did it, this would have changed that. There was the API key, parameter, I don't know what they said.
Yeah.
So what I'm curious about is that like, and this.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Right, so do you add parameters and others? Like, can't do that, that's one way. So all I need is add it to your own and then use the message, like normal.
Yeah.
Like no headers or body.
Yep. I think so.
I wanna try this.
Yeah, I know that works. I've done that once before. I'm pretty sure you can do it in the URL as well.
Let's see, so if I pull this, up.
I would say once you get that figured out, spend your time
taking what you got from the JSON response,
Yeah.
writing into the HTML page.
Yeah, that's what I'm,
Once you've done that, apply some CSS to it.
right.
I don't know what they expect.
Need to get it show up first. So this
Well,
was,
they get-
there's nothing
Okay,
there.
but if you open up DevTools and you take a look at the network page, you probably see a request happening, right? Reload the page. Yeah. You get a 401, yeah, you don't have that token. Yeah, exactly. If you take a look at the response, I bet you get the response for that first one you had it posted. Oh, you do.
Unless that's the wrong one. Let me just double check what's actually ready. They might have-
And then maybe everyone's found.
maybe like if it's not. Maybe it wants me to do.
Yeah, the URL. That copy and paste it in the string.
Where was the
Then
photo
we're like,
sent
we'll
again?
get
I posted it in Slack.
Oh.
I think I'm Google Classroom.
Sorry, I've been really bad at this room. I'm gonna make an assignment for this though. I would like you guys to post this by the end of the class, or just post whatever you have at least. No, I mean like at the end tomorrow, like at the end of the module. Sorry.
They give you a free 30-day trial.
Yeah, try that.
Then after that, I don't know how much it is. The library might actually give you access to it.
Yeah, better.
200. Okay.
So it has to be like that.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. Well, I figured that out. That's good.
Yeah, so
Now I need
So
to.
you get the body out of it.
Right, so.
And then once you get the body out of it, you gotta JSON decode that body. We've done this before.
Yeah, I have to just remember how to do it.
Yeah, and once you've done that, you can log out that data, and then you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
So. Okay. Okay. So we can figure it out first.
Last Wednesday. Not that far.
Yeah. You're very close. This guy here. So before, kind of like this. Oh, you had a function. The reason why it's not is a global value called response. It's used for something well, it's related. But it's different. That though. There we go.
I also have this one.
Yeah, so the method. Something that you run a response, it gives you back that text. When you execute that, and that gives you back a promise. If you're gonna run this here, that's the promise for the whole thing. That's the promise for like that. That's the promise for there. But one's going to happen before the other. In this case here, you have the response. The response came back from the server. And one of the things that was competing was the response coming back from the server. The other thing that was competing was you opening that up and taking a look at the value inside of it. So because you did that afterwards, the value came back from the server and was stored in the promise and then you looked at it. In real life, though, or in code, it would be the other way around. You would look at it before it comes back. It's a little bit confusing just because of the way that you're using the console. But if we were to do something like
you are at how many days of challenge?
I think today is actually 50.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. Call dot then this promise here.
Something.
Now we have a second promise inside. So compact together. Oh, yeah, there we go. Right there. So in this case, we have the second then on this error, this promise on the text. The second then, the first time the promise runs, the first time the promise runs, we're going to run this function plus repeats. Second time it runs, we're going to run this function, we'll just decode the text out of the response. So this is how you want to do it in code. Because in this case, instead of just like clicking on something and looking at the response like that, here you're saying, when the response comes back from the server, call this function. And this they come back like you don't have a race problem there because you're not having two things that are competing over the same resource. Those things aren't happening in parallel. You're saying when the text comes back, run this function, not the text comes back, I'm going to run my code at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I could do like, I could store text.
Yeah. So you only have access, well, you do if you like look through the promise in here, but you only have access programmatically to the value in the promise through them. There's no other way to extract it out other than do that. Okay, cool. And then we'll take a look at all the New York Times exercise. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Well, I would say it's probably worth looking at this a little bit today, just because there's a sort of thing where I am somewhat concerned that people aren't going to get through it. I think it's a while. So I would say either way, definitely spend time looking at it.
Oh,
How you guys doing?
I have a question. I mean, I signed the. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, you picked the winner and I come back.
No. You came here first. You guys have my first priority.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think you probably has a better question.
no, it's fine.
Go for it.
I'm gonna try to figure it out first.
No, I just signed the to like New York Times right now, so I haven't even started yet.
Okay.
Getting started right now.
Okay.
I just tried fetch request and I got back some stuff and I don't know if this is what I want.
You weren't here yesterday, right?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. You didn't get to hear the lesson on cores.
Ooh,
We have there's a cores problem. Cores. Cross-origin resource sharing, the thing that fills every developer's heart with dread.
I'm scared.
Yeah, let's
Go back to yesterday.
see. Okay.
This is a little token I got.
Yep.
A while ago.
Yeah.
So buying, right? So
roughly on the right track. Now, I would say, remember I was talking about that little try thing example that the zip thing has? Give that a try. So you got to make the screen a little wider. The fragmentation is very poorly put together. If you try this API, it just kind of appears.
It's extremely responsive.
Yeah, for sure.
That's really funny.
So,
I wonder how much of the world I missed because of that.
yeah.
Okay.
I bet that's probably part of the reason you guys had problems too. That like.
Yeah, you just can't see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So go back to the overview endpoint, the one that I. You see there, try this API as a single box. What is what do you need to put in for publish date?
Something that looks like this.
Yeah. So put in something that looks like that. Yeah, try it. Okay. Interesting. Absolutely. Oh, sign in. Hit back a couple times, get back to that where we're at. Refresh it. Yeah. Okay. Try it again. See what happens. Still not working. Well, I see if you look above, do you see this button that says authorize?
Yeah.
It does look kind of, try that, see what happens.
What's my key?
Yeah, on your key it looks like.
Okay. That's fine.
Got one of those. Oh no. Or maybe that works too. Try that. Just click authorize, see what happens. Yeah, okay, cool. Click out of it, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. We'll just go away.
Yeah, try it now.
And then try now. Look at it, things.
Okay, so that worked.
Yeah,
That's sweet.
that's new.
So can you explain to me what it did here? Like when you clicked execute, what did it do behind the scenes?
It went to the state and gave back an overview of a list of the books.
Yeah, okay. So like how did it make the request? So how did it make a request to the server? How did it go about making that request? What did it do?
Well, I did like what I did.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
a fetch thing.
Yeah. So if they made that fetch request, and when you make a fetch request, you can see how that works in DevTools. Can you see how that request works in DevTools? Oh, go to the network pane. Look over there. Take a look at it. I'll come back.
Okay.
Take a look at it.
Sweet. Thanks.
Okay. I kind of have forgotten what I'm supposed to do. And where is the, but this is what let me show you. So that's the request I made. This is what I want. I don't really remember.
No, this looks perfect.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So if you scroll up for a bit. So you notice we have a results object.
Yeah.
Inside of there we have a books array here.
Right.
And there's an object here that looks like it has some book information in it, like a publisher or description.
Yeah.
That looks good. If you keep scrolling down, keep going, there's another book object. More book information like that.
Okay. So I got what I was supposed to get.
Yeah. Looks like it is.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So what I would say, take this request you made, take everything this request is doing, instead of doing the post management.
I didn't know that.
Do everything this request
Right.
is doing, only do it with post management. Or do it with fetch, not post.
Okay, so this has to go back over to here, which is my.
Exactly.
So this has to go out.
Yeah, so
And that other one goes in.
exactly. So it's just going to be a game of copy and paste from this into the other one. Yeah, you're doing very well. Like,
Just a thing.
I'm trying to find my key. Yeah, you're trying to find your key. Go to the get started section. I remember that's where I was looking for this stuff. Oh yeah, good. So my apps, yeah, you have to go inside of there. Go like their documentation is a little questionable. Yeah. Yeah, but if you click on there, there's a key right there.
So I copied that.
Yeah.
So what is this over here?
I don't know, but like that's fine.
So just copy these and then.
Well, so what you're going to be doing there is if you make a fetch request of that, you're going to request this HTML page. You're not going to request the New York Times information.
That's not what I wanted.
No, that's not what you want to do. So if you take a look at the exercise, the goal of the exercise is to make a request to the New York Times and to get back in the response a bunch of JSON information. It talks about all the different books, that the top published books they have, all the information about those top published books.
Okay.
So I gave you a link in that document. If you take a look at that. Yeah, that one. Exactly. That link right there. That links to the endpoint you want to use. That's all the information you need to use when you make the request. But the thing is, I would say spend some time reading through this, see what you can understand. But it's a bit of a hard thing. Like it's a bit dense. I completely understand if you're having some trouble with the directions. So try this. Can you make this a little wider? Oh, interesting. It's a little wider. Can't we just try this API thing? Remember I was talking about that? Like those things are often really handy.
So like give it a.
Yeah, so read through the documentation, use the documentation and try to fill that out and see if you can use that to make a request. Because what they're going to do is they're going to properly set everything up for you because they wrote the API. And if that thing works, then like you're golden. Because if that thing works, you can just copy whatever they do. So that's why I say these sorts of things are so great, because if you can get it working with the way they did it, then it's easy. So anyway, try it out. You know.
Okay, so I have it in here, but nothing comes up in the document.
Open up DevTools. And go back to your code for a second. JavaScript.
I may just copy and paste it.
Yeah, so what you have here is you are making a request. You're not doing anything with the request though. So I bet if you go into the network pane in DevTools, like a little network tab on the top, you're probably going to see it made their request.
Okay.
Yeah, reload the page. Just so see this guy, this console, and drag it down. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so right there, that's your request.
Okay.
It made the request successfully. If you click on it, see it's 200. That's good. You go to like preview a response, you can see the JSON in there. That's the same as you got in Postman, so that's good.
Okay, so basically, I just have to like do a console log it.
You need to, I would say, take a look back at the fetch lesson and how we did like attach the promise to it and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But you have the first part perfectly fine. So you're making very good progress.
Good. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Did you figure it out?
I feel like I have to include something here.
Trying to get the text of the response. Take a look at the end of the fetch day. There was a slide that talked about it. It had an example of this.
That day 2.
Is that what?
That's day 2, Tuesday. I'm trying to think. The 21st, right? No. When we did the fetch lesson, I think it was day 2.
It wasn't day 2 of the module. It was like maybe day 2 of last
Day
week.
4?
Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay.
No, not a response. That was the day when I first made it.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out.
Go a bit further up. One more. One more. Yeah, this sort of thing.
Yeah,
So.
and I was putting, okay, but I was running into a problem where like, because you have to put it inside the same function, otherwise you can't access the variable, right?
Mhm.
So I literally did. Oh, I didn't do the dot the second time.
Yeah. I still have syntax error. I didn't fix.
That's what I did.
Should be a parenthesis between those curly braces.
Yeah, for this function.
Yeah.
That's okay. So, right,
Figure that out sooner.
so I can do, right, so I can do bar. Right, I can do that, right?
Sure. Go back to the slide.
I don't want to.
It's fine. You're gonna figure this stuff out. You're gonna get the muscle memory eventually. Yeah, we're on the right track. I'll let you go think about it some more. How you guys doing? Yeah.
I remember how to fetch. I don't think.
Okay. Yeah.
I
So
just think, I just don't know where. I got something out of this, that was their example. And I got a key.
Yep.
That much out.
okay. Yeah.
But now I'm not sure which list I'm getting. Because they all have different. things. Right, I guess I'm just not sure. What
Yeah.
list you want.
So the list I want is this one right here. I'll keep that in a different tab here. So you see it. So,
I tend to not want tabs.
I do too. All developers do. This is the one I want. List overview. So get top 5 books for all the best bestsellers list for a specific date. So what this request does, and I'll let you read about it on your own too, but you make a request to it, it gives you back a bunch of information about the New York Times the top sellers list. You know, they're like their thing they do is they do that sort of thing.
Right.
They give you back that list, and they give it back to you in JSON. You can take that JSON and you can do something with it. So what I was saying was take that JSON, get it back, somehow display it on the screen in some sort of way. Okay, the first step there is you have to make the request and contain it. And that's really the thing I was hoping people would be able to spend some time on today. So that's where I would say focus your time to start with. But when you first look at this page, what jumps out at you?
I mean, there's that, which is how pretty close to what I made the request on.
Yeah.
I mean, it did, but
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. So you it's pretty close to what you had before. You know what method you need to use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have to assume it tells me.
Yeah, exactly. So like look for sorts of things that you look for terms that you're familiar with. Like yeah, that's a method. I imagine at this point you're somewhat familiar with that. Like URL, list overview. That's a concept that or a path, a concept we've talked about. There's a full URL for like what would go up in there. It has book path and where exactly you have to make the request to. It sounds like you mostly got all that stuff with what you had before. I used to be using a different one of these. So if you go down that same path with this one, you did it with the other one. And I will say, you had it before, you can pretty much swap out the path that you had with this path, and it should pretty much work. So if you run that fetch request, and you take a look at the network pane on your web browser, keep in mind, every single time you make a request, any sort of request that the browser makes, whether that be get HTML, get JavaScript, get images, CSS, whatever, fonts, it's going to show that in the network page. So if you make a web request in your browser, you go to the network page, the fetch request in the console, you're going to see that. And you can see like, oh, was that successful? That's a kind of a quick way to go about doing that sort of experimentation. If you see, oh, it's not successful, you can be like, okay, well, let me try something else. I would say start there. And then I was bringing up the whole like looking for demo or try API things. Just one of those on here.
I did it on a different.
Yeah. Okay. So you're familiar with this.
I was like, all right.
So I'd say try this out too. You got to enter a field, but I'll let you read through this and figure out the field format of it and all that stuff. But I just worked close with someone else, and we were able to make this work. So keep in mind, because the web browser is making a request, either you're doing it in the console or if you're using this, it's making a request as part of the page. Like if you click execute, it runs a fetch behind the scenes. Either way, you can see in the network pane that request.
Yeah, totally.
So either the request you make or the request this
It's like even the forward widget.
I know that this one's wrong, but, is this what you wanted us to do the first time?
Yeah, I mean,
So then when I, on the next steps, would I end up, can I make the request from here and then add it to this document?
Yeah.
Other way?
Yeah, so I would say better. The end goal is for the request you somehow are making in the browser to make its way into that file. To take the fetch you're typing in and to put it into that file. So when you load up that HTML file, it loads in that JavaScript. Now when that JavaScript runs, it then makes your request right away.
Oh, okay.
So the total end goal of this, and I showed this near the beginning of the class, was you load up the page. It makes a request to the New York Times. It gets back a response from the New York Times that's JSON information. You decode that JSON information, and you somehow render it in the screen. That could be as simple as just creating like a div and putting all the JSON just in there as text. It could be fancier, like you loop through that JSON and you make like an entry for every book. That's what I did, but I kind of done this stuff a couple times, so that wasn't too bad. But yeah, I mean, I'd say either one is successful. Through this, you're demonstrating that you understand to some degree how network requests work. You can make a request to a third-party service. You can render that stuff to a page, and you could style the CSS if you want. That kind of shows you've done everything from the beginning of the class up until now, kind of title. Like today,
Give it a shot.
Makes more sense a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. Cool.
Thank you.
We can't get past authorization.
Yes. So this is not very obvious. Click off of this. Is that what you're trying to say?
No.
No?
I can't get past authorization. I'm putting in my key.
Edit? Yeah, you got your key there. Authorize. I think that's good.
So nothing comes back to me saying that it was successful. I mean, I'm waiting for something to let me know that.
Probably not. I'm sorry.
And
I will say that the endpoint you're looking at now isn't the one that I have in my page. I don't know if that's something you're doing on purpose or not. But
I was just going to each one trying to figure out why I wasn't authorized because it's not telling me that I was authorized.
yeah, so I would say that go to the GitHub page I linked and click on the link in there, and it'll give you a link directly to the endpoint you want to use. This is the go into that guy. It's final exercises on empty. That's the endpoint you want to use. So that's the documentation for the endpoint. You go to that guy.
And now I don't need to try to authorize this.
I don't think so. Wouldn't hurt, but I don't think you need to. So look at this. I'd say what all the answers you need should be on this page. I kind of made it a little easier for you guys. I told you exactly the endpoint you needed to use. Didn't make you go find it or anything like that. But yeah, do a little bit of playing. Let me know if we still have some problems.
All right, thank you.
We had any progress?
Yeah, I guess I don't really know what you mean. I see what they did. It doesn't look like what doing exactly.
Go back to DevTools. Okay, so they got a URL.
Right.
They got a method.
Mm-hmm.
They got some headers, and they don't have, it's a get, so they don't have a body. But so you know that. If you go over to here, scroll up, so you've got a URL, you've got a method,
Yeah.
you've got some headers too. So does your URL match their URL?
It really should. No, there's all this extra stuff here.
Yeah.
What's all this extra stuff?
Query parameters. I talked about those. Maybe you weren't here for that thing or something.
Okay.
Well, so query parameters are a way you can specify extra information in the URL. Sometimes you'll do that. It's a
When
third
the
way.
URL is not enough information.
Yeah, you'd think, oh, I'll just put it in the header. Like that would be good enough. But no, there's query parameters or another way of doing it.
So okay, they say HTTP request. Boom.
Mhm.
But that's not what they do.
Well,
What they do is this and this other stuff.
the reason why is often the way people write this sort of stuff out, often they'll assume people just know about query parameters, or they'll list them out separately. And what they do is they don't do either of these, and the way they make you figure it out is they make you go through to their API and like read the getting started guide. And it says, these are the query parameters that you have to have.
Here?
No, it's like, yeah, it's in APIs, I think, or something like that.
And then, so we're in the focus API, right?
Yeah.
And then we're in the overview.
Maybe it wasn't getting started. Doesn't look like it's in there.
That was like the
Yeah, it's
super basic get started.
I'm wondering if there's like a technical get started link in there or something like that. Like if you go to the bottom of that get started page, you can see. Yeah, go to that might have been where we just were at APIs page. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Stories. Okay. And the right dish. We got that one.
Yeah. Can you scroll down there at all? Ah, yeah. You can. Yeah, see.
Example
query
calls.
parameters. Example calls.
So URL, and there's probably stops about here. And then here goes our query parameter.
Yeah. So if you notice, they've got an API key query parameter. Like we talk about putting keys or tokens in headers. What's going on there?
Yeah.
Well, they're not following the standards. They're doing things their own special way.
That's cool.
Not so cool. It's really kind of evil.
Bastards.
Yeah. They're the reason.
I just thought saying.
Yeah, but I bet if you go back to your code, you put in that query parameter there. If you save that and you try that out in a browser, I bet it's going to work for you. Yeah, it looks like it's going to work. Maybe you have a syntax error, but like conceptually, what you have is going to work. You know, that's fine. That's fine. One of these times it's going to work, though. Yeah. Like, yeah. Syntax error. Okay. Those are okay. So, and I'll say properly injecting your code really helps to catch these. So we got those curly braces, we got those, we got all that. So we got string there, we got curly braces, we got key value. There.
This one goes to that one.
Yep.
That one goes all the way down to that one.
Yep. And this one goes to that one. Those ones go to those ones. All your strings quoted. That looks okay. Okay. Now, promise.then looks okay. Function response, that looks okay. Now, this is a syntax error, but it would be helpful to read your code if you took everything inside of this function and indented it over a bit.
Okay.
Just like you did with the object in here. So if you do that, then it makes it a lot easier to catch these sorts of syntax errors.
JavaScript is a little strange. I don't know where things start. So that you say like that?
Put a tab before the var line there, the var promise too, yeah. So everything inside of here, we got curly, or parenthesis, parenthesis, curly brace, curly brace. Everything inside of there is indented in one.
Oh, okay, because the second promise is not separate. It's part of the promise.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, now if we look at this, so we got log it out, that's fine. Promise to is equal to response.text, okay, that's fine. Promise.then, we got a parenthesis, we got a curly brace, we got a curly brace, but
Why is that parenthesis outside the curly brace?
what parenthesis outside the curly brace? Well, because that one matches with this one. See how you can tell by the indentation that those ones are for that thing? So that this guy here is the same indentation level as this guy here. The parentheses, therefore, because they're the same indentation level, if you indent your code in a sort of way like this, it means that you can then look at these parentheses and you can say, oh, these guys, they match together. Even if you hover over it, the editor will probably do it for you too. Like it'll say like,
Trying to make
yeah.
So yeah, right now it's saying that this one goes
Yeah.
right here,
Now-
not all the way up to there.
But if that's the case, then your parentheses are not evenly matched. So because your code's indented like this, do you see where do you think the extra parenthesis needs to go? Very, very close, but not quite. Have on the right line. Goes parenthesis, curly brace, curly brace, parenthesis. Yeah. So
And then you have
yeah, semicolon. Sure, that works. Yes, try that out. I bet that'll work more than a thing.
yes.
You're doing a good job. Doing a good job.
Yeah, mine is not working. Not.
Oh, whoa.
Okay, I'll get to you in a second.
Yeah, different things.
That's a fun one. So we got a chorus problem. Now, read through this error, especially the last sentence of it.
What other field authorization is not allowed? I access control header and some strange words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what words do you recognize out of there? Probably header.
Request under field authorization is not allowed.
Do you recognize authorization? So it's
mad about my key.
you've got, it says header authorization. Got an authorization header. So typically if I see something like this, I would think, let me try playing with that header. In fact, I might even go as far as to say, I take a look at this request if it's
Where's their header?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Where's their header? Trying to find where you made it before successfully.
Similar difficulty in finding that.
Doesn't help that you're scrolling there first. Yeah, I'm weird apparently, but maybe I just do it the way it was done before. Search for it over. Oh, I think I should
I kind of understand. I see
The,
word switch and I don't understand. It's strange.
Well, I'll tell you what I was going to show you, but the request that it makes doesn't have an authorization header in it. When you use this thing, we use.
So I don't need to do this authorization thing with every tag request.
You don't.
I
Now,
did it the first time and now I'm in, so it doesn't need it.
well, take a look at the request. Got your token here. You've also got a key here. So what I would just guess by looking at this is it's not using this.
Right.
In fact, when you use this, it's causing it to blow up.
It's confused.
Yeah.
Like you're already in the house, why are you trying to use the key to get in the front door?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So try removing that headers line.
interesting.
Get rid of that authorization header. See what happens.
How about I do it just in the,
Yeah, that works too. Just in the console. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but try that.
oh, I asked it to give me the text.
It looks like a bunch of JSON.
And then it did, and I'm like confused.
So that's a good thing. Got
Okay.
200.
Yes.
Got a bunch of JSON.
Got some
It looks
stuff.
like some New York Times data.
Looks like a big old object
Yeah.
with things in it.
You know how to parse an object, right?
Yeah.
Parse the object.
JSON parsing stuff.
Yeah, parse the object. Log it out.
Oh.
Once you've done that, do
go.
stuff with the object. Like, for example, maybe add to the body. Like, maybe you want to take every book and you want to make a list item for each one, make an unordered list and render the name of each book in that unordered list.
Totally did that like a week ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got this.
Okay, yay. That's
Cool.
exciting.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
So keep on going.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not working.
Yeah, it's not working. Well,
Too many requests to refresh your company or calculate rate.
where? What?
So bad.
So that
So I
happens.
can't make any requests
Well,
now.
No, so this is just listing all the possible types you could get. in
Oh, no, I
response.
was bad.
Yeah, I mean, this is just one of the ones you could get.
Oh.
But I'm guessing you probably aren't getting this one yet. Like you'd have to make like thousands of requests to hit that. So maybe you are, but let's operate on the assumption right now you aren't. Just so, because if you are, that's a broader problem, and I don't want to have to worry about that right now.
I'll just create a new account.
Yeah, that would work. Okay, well, so in general, you have first of all, the endpoint you have here isn't the endpoint that was in that page that I had in the documentation. I don't know if that's something you're doing on purpose, but
Just I don't find everything.
okay, yeah, no problem.
So,
This guy.
oh yeah, I tried this.
Okay, let's give it a try.
Yeah, I was trying to do it from. Not the same thing.
Yeah. So let's do this. Remember how whenever you make a request in the web browser, you can see the request in DevTools, no matter what the thing it requests. Let's take a look at that. I'm gonna hear that. I'm gonna make it smaller, hopefully, so we can hopefully squeeze it and get this thing. Yeah. Hear that. Execute. So got something. Have you done this before? Where you've used No, okay. So the network pane is incredibly helpful because whenever you do anything with web browser that's a network pane, it will show you that. So if I reload the page, it's going to show me all the HTML that's fetched to load the page, all the CSS, and all the resources that the page needs to work. Because when it does that, when the web browser loads, makes a request and gets index.html, but it indexed that HTML page, it loads that, runs that in the browser. And then it'll say, oh, I need some CSS. And it gets that CSS file. It uses that. And it says, oh, I need some JavaScript. It does that. Or it needs images, or it needs fonts, or different sorts of resources. Sorry. And the network pane is going to show you all that. It's going to show you all the stuff that all the requests the web page makes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So effectively, what I was kind of going over when I was talking up there, when you have if your web page is a way you can try things out, try this API thing, which I was kind of saying about before, like it's a good way to maybe experiment around with an API. Something like this, it has to make an HTTP request. Imagine you needed to write one of these, like you were a developer at the time, and they said, we need you to write a thing to try out APIs. Like, roughly, how would you approach it? I would guess. Well, yeah, take a guess. Yeah. Okay, well, you probably remember from the last module, if you have a button, you can add an event listener to it, and you click on it, you can run some code. So if you can do that, click on the execute button, so run some code. How do you do something like make a fetch call that function? So when you click the execute button, you can make a fetch call. And when you get data back from that fetch call, you can like render to the screen or something like that. That's it's a relatively common pattern. Because this tool is using fetch, you can see what's going on whenever I click execute or I do anything on this page. You can see whatever requests it makes over here. The reason why I bring that up is if I'm here and I click execute, I get an error here. This error is incredibly unhelpful. Like, is trusted true unknown status? What type does that mean? If I go to DevTools, I can see here, I got a 401 unauthorized. That makes a lot more sense. Like, you could look up, what does a 401 status code mean? Or you could look up unauthorized. And if you do, you'll figure out it means you don't have a token, or you don't have authorization to access it, or you don't have a key. Exactly. So, given I just said that, if you look around the page, what do you think you could do to maybe give yourself authorization or give yourself a key? Are there any sort of like buttons or like things you could click or any sort of things you can interact with?
I can't answer that. I mean, with these.
Take a look near the top of the page.
Authorized.
There we go. Either works. Oh, that's not our key. Go back to that the page you were at before. On that guy, the one before it. I'll just use the key from that project. It looks like. Click outside of it. It's goofy the way that works, but.
Oh, so this is authorized, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. So try making a request again. Oh, that's good. Okay, so you made the request that succeeded, but like you don't know how, you still don't like know your method or like sort of stuff like that. You can read this and it'll tell you all that sort of stuff, but you tried it out, but you don't have like the exact request you made. But we got that before. How do we figure that out before? What were we looking at in DevTools that showed us that?
You're looking at the HTML. I have to go back and inspect.
Yeah, exactly. So, unfortunately, you got to make it again. You have to have it open and make it like this. So, you've got some new items in there. Okay, take a look at these. Click through them, see what you see. So, you have two entries there. Do you know what the first entry is? In particular, see that request method. Does that ring a bell? Something we were talking about yesterday.
Getting the API or getting no, it
doesn't. Okay. So I would say it's probably worthwhile to review what we talked about yesterday. But records. This is that pre-flight request we were talking about.
It's not.
In effect, it's a request that's being made before the actual request for security reasons. Now, I would say it's worthwhile you go look at what we talked about yesterday. So I went into it much more in depth and watch the video or something. But it's in effect, the first one you're not going to care about. It's the second one that's the important one. This is the request that you asked the web page to make. You clicked execute and made a request. So what do you see in here? You see a bunch of information, like see a method, see a URL, see a bunch of headers. There's no body, but it's a get, so that's not too weird to have. But you have a bunch of information. Can you use all this information to make the request on your own? Try that out. Do it with whatever tool you want, whatever you're comfortable with. What did you think of Postman?
That was yeah, I really like that.
Okay, make it Postman. You know the method, you know the URL, you know some headers. Give that a try. If you get us received in Postman, then we can try to make it work in Fetch. But you have to work at Postman first. You can make sure like it works outside of the browser. You can get something that works. That gives us a place to start. So sounds like you're on the right track now. But
Yeah, I would have to review.
yeah, I would say it's probably worthwhile for you to look definitely at yesterday's lesson, possibly at the Fetch lesson.
Yeah, still I'm struggling with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see what it does, but understanding it completely is Fetch and Promise.
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand. If you want, maybe afterwards, we can chat some more about it in class.
Okay.
But try figuring it out in Postman to start with.
Any question? Am I doing this wrong?
No, it looks right. So you're running JSON.parse on the response, not on the text that you get out of that response.
So, where should I do response on question?
Well, response that text to promise.
Yeah.
When you get print data, you call print data.then. You get this text, you log in the text. The type of text there is a string. Text the string. You could take a string and you could parse it as JSON. Or you could do any other thing to a string.
So how would I call it though? Because if I say like text, then it says that's not defined. Not variable.
Text is not
Right,
right there.
Yeah.
Well, because it isn't defined in that context.
It needs to be like this.
No, so that would just be like a string text.
That's what
Yeah, you need text. You got that part right. But let's look through this here. Put text back in there. So if you're running through here, let's say we're inside of this promise here. Log out the response. Call response.text. Right. Store the result out print data.
Right.
Then we call print data.then. Call and when it's able to decode the response text, it runs this function here inside the promise. After that, it logs out the text you got out of that promise, and then it exits that function.
Right.
And then afterwards, you're saying JSON.parse is the variable text, and put that into display data.
Oh.
You understand what you need to do?
You have to move it up?
Exactly.
I thought I did that though. Maybe I try it but with a different thing on it. Sorry, with a different.
I would say probably log that out too, just so that you can ensure it works.
So that works, but then it's not here. So.
Yeah. Well, you didn't do anything.
Right. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Do something like console.log display data, just to see what happens there. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, okay. So it was working. I just was expecting something different.
Yeah, so you did something, but you didn't do anything to show yourself the result.
Okay.
And whenever you do like a testing process like this,
Oh.
you always need to log it out or yeah.
Okay.
No problem. It happens.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I think it's a similar problem.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, so do the fetch. I got that. So now,
Okay. Yeah.
nothing's here.
Yeah, so we have a standard promise here, calling .then, and give it, you're passing a function, single text parameter. That's fine. Inside of it now, you are creating a new variable called text and assigning it to the function JSON.parse.
Okay,
And then you are logging out the variable you just created text.
okay.
Now,
So I need to define text somewhere.
well, the broader issue, you've specified this text parameter here, but you've never actually done anything with that text parameter. You've immediately overwritten it with something else. You
Okay,
said, effectively, this is like going var a is equal to 1 and then going a is equal to 2.
okay.
You've never done anything with 1. You've overwritten it with 2.
So if I take this out and I just console log
If you
text,
do start there, yeah, do that. What happens when you do that? Well, you got stuff there. Yeah, forget about the browser window
Okay.
for right now. Just
All
worry
right.
about the logging things out.
No, we're back to text.
You gotta,
how do I get rid of this one now?
how do you get rid of?
Scratch JS, is that what that, why are there two?
Oh, so escape, it'll toggle
Okay,
that. Yeah,
um,
so now you can drag it up at the top there, up and down.
so this is what I want,
Yes, that's the request. It made that successfully, so that's all good.
okay,
Now if you go to your JavaScript console,
there it is.
yeah, you got all that. So that looks like a bunch of JSON. It's got a lot of curly braces, a lot of quotes, a lot of
Okay,
brackets, stuff like that.
all right, so that's good.
Logged up 200 at the very top, which you asked it to do over
Always
there.
good time.
Always a good sign. Starts with 2.
Okay,
Everything worked well. Go back to your code. Yeah, and so you asked to log up the status. Okay. So right now the type of this variable, our variable text is a string.
okay,
You want to take that string text and you want to convert it into, you want to parse it as JSON and convert it into an object.
correct.
So think back to the JSON class.
Yeah, it's just for that.
How do we take a string and make it into an object? Yeah, exactly like this.
Right.
So I made a new variable called text.
Mm-hmm.
I then passed it into the function JSON.parse and it assigned this value equal to another variable. I call it data.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can do things with data.
Okay,
So try to do that.
okay. Got it, all right, thank you.
Yeah. Now the key piece is that you need JSON.parse the function and you need to call that function with some text. You weren't doing that before.
Okay, so I just had, okay, let me play with this.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Let's see. On this guy. Here. Oh, yes. Okay. So I'm going to take look very closely at this request. Where did you get this request from, by the way? Oh. Huh. Yeah, okay. Now, that's kind of give you a curl. Oh, that's amazing.
Having just as much fun as everybody else. Come
What we
on.
did here, so like when you just copy this over, you accidentally miscopied something. Now, let's take a look, read through this URL. All the way to the end and see exactly what they.
Just, I keep like a half an ear tuned to like whatever he's telling anybody.
Something you forgot or something
Yeah,
extra.
something
Out of place.
Right, yeah, because like people often have secrets, even if they're different questions, I'm like, oh, that's cool.
See what happens.
But he said maybe you miscopied something.
Okay.
And I'm like,
The other thing is,
control C.
this is just, not least.
Control C.
Where was, there it is.
Maybe it's because
Your PI key.
Obviously, I don't understand.
I think they just need to say, plug your API keys here.
Automatically.
Getting rid of the brackets in your thing. See what that does. I'm actually magic crossword.
Just vaguely, because my internet kept going in and out, so I have to
Take a
watch
look in
it.
there too. The last request you made should be successful. So we just got this data from them.
Wait, so do you have to make it?
No, I do automatically and
So how did you do it all?
so when you turn
Now,
on
part of the reason you got that short there, because the way this API
I have a little diagram and send back there.
is you take requests.
Letting them
So,
out.
take
Oh,
that.
so you did 2 hours, so you got
Yeah, so the first part.
So you were making a right that they don't world.
And now they're like in gray.
Whatever you
They
get back.
take her
So that is like,
So because of that, when you make that request, I mean,
Like-
if you were to make this request now, another way,
around here, like,
take
So,
it.
yeah, so sort of,
But you just run red,
so if you don't have a key, you can't get it.
yeah, well,
take that and copy it,
in this case, it would be your full of and make a request or not.
and just, yeah,
So
you can use that data. You can, yeah.
And they are able to make.
So anyone who doesn't have an account, they cannot.
Yeah, they don't, I think you can let everyone.
So why that is.
I know, and like.
I know it's somewhere in this.
Say, oh, my friend,
Background.
Google.com.
So, yeah, so yeah, it's just like an email account, but you
Yeah.
can't access the emails unless you have a password and the
I think
address.
so, by the way.
Same with, like, I mean, so if you don't have like an account,
Effectively,
New
if you,
York Times.
if you take requests to someone that isn't one you're
Oh,
returning.
yeah,
for,
the Android token.
like, they get
Yeah,
that
yeah,
cross-origin
so
request,
that's the-
like,
Authorization.
cross-origin request.
So-
has to be approved
I
by
don't
the
know how
server.
to record like hours.
That pre-play request, that request that happens before the request, it has.
You have to actually.
If you were running into, it sounds like you're running, you said you're running into four protocols. The most likely, you were making a request, and the server is saying, wait a second, where are you making this from? No, no, no.
Yeah, so this is.
I'm just saying,
Like,
you
you
can
can
leave
do
this
that.
cross-origin request.
Allow origin. Or you want to do
Now,
that
if
pre-play.
you're making a request to a valid identity.
You can allow origin to start
That's
on
what
your
you
time.
here.
You don't need to be.
And that,
It's just open.
but it's just, if you're making a request to a server that doesn't look at high order, so it doesn't have that order enough.
So it's just at the start, so it's just like anyone who makes a request. Everyone can make it. Get your option.
Where's the access
That's
control?
perfectly fine.
That's right.
Well, that
Say-
method, yeah.
it's a nice way to go to
See,
the
see
point,
how,
but that's-
Yeah, I'm gonna
server
hear about that.
specifies, like, you can make a get request, or you can make an option request, and anyone can make this request.
Yeah.
But they
So
could
you're
specify,
gonna,
like, the specific domain.
you're gonna right, take this, copy it.
If you weren't, the domain, it would reject it, and they would like go back saying, no, whatever. And then the browser would make your first request.
Yeah, just overwrite that stuff.
Where my head is
going
going at.
or something.
Okay, so like, in this case, I'm just thinking if you don't have all this entered, you don't get the information that you want. I don't know.
And take the second line,
I think you need to
put the new lines and the enters and the spacing in the right place.
So like you had to generate a
So-
token, right, when you author.
So like, you, yeah. Have you
That's what I
ever
was
sort of
like,
like
having
done any sort
server
of
one,
learning how you
like,
identify
you
code
don't have
usually?
authorization, you need a request.
See, I was thinking
Yeah.
like about
It's
this
just-
week,
it's
like,
just
I
so
have
much
done
that it would be easier to
previously,
get.
so it's kind of like when you were
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
in the classroom, like we speed testing, they, we did
Like the caption,
the cache.
separate from the.
Not the same thing.
No, this is more just like, are you allowed to do it in the first place?
Okay.
So, the reason why I did it like that is because now, every single open parenthesis is on the same level, indentational, as every single closed parenthesis, every single open curly brace, the same indentational level as closed curly brace. Otherwise, just like with this now, I can see there are two promises that are happening in order. One happens, and then after the other one, the first one's done, the second one happens.
outside of there, and then after that's done, log out some text. Do you think this makes it, does this make it clearer for you, like how things are happening?
Same problem.
I guess. As far as that what you're doing.
Oh,
before.
fine.
Let me type, where you were typing that variable before this code. I bet I do that, and you're like, oh, wow, that's typing
I
that.
guess that's how I should phrase
Type
it.
it up
Like,
here.
what am I?
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's not gonna work.
So
yeah.
I
So-
asked her.
Yeah. Try that out. Sure.
Okay. And this looks like an object.
I'm guessing you probably want to first add JSON, or you want something.
And then you parse it.
Yeah.
To get out of the string.
So the JavaScript, that'd be great.
Yeah, you did accept this, so to some degree, you have to trust the server's gonna teach you.
Yeah.
But that's the
That's
best
what I
assurance
was
you can have.
like, am I
But
just
isn't
not
JSON
asking for
when
the
it tries
right
to
thing?
decode, it will
Because what
crash.
I want is in status and results.
Yeah.
And then one of these things.
Catch that error, do something special with it, but.
So what I
it's
want
not
is an
absolute, but
array
it's
of
just the service
lists.
never return JSON.
Or this next is
Hey, it is JSON.
The list object, so then when
I want the
you,
list object.
yeah,
So then we start saying crazy junk like
so I'm thinking.
status dot result dot list. But then we get mad deep and then it's gonna be undefined.
Perfect. So
Wait,
now, log out your data, just put a complement log data after,
like
just so we can see
retaining
what's
like
happening.
that,
Otherwise,
right?
stuff's gonna happen and we're not gonna be able to see
It's
what we
not.
actually did.
So I,
So,
that's not what that
Open it up
carrot
on a
means.
web browser.
I know, hold on here, because you're looking at one big tree, right?
Right.
Here.
We don't want to.
Oh, how that's set up. Fancy.
Because it's
Open
recommending
it, look at it,
use
but like,
like text.
so
Okay,
it's
text
just the
console.
one big object, right? Mine's probably
Yeah.
Yeah. like,
Yeah.
open, but yeah, so status is one, field, copyright,
That's the first
and then
JSON.
results, names, right?
Yeah, well, that's correct. You got the first version.
Okay.
All the.
Now you got the first version.
I'm consistently like,
What do you
by the
get,
fact
like-
that I like a small screen.
The reading assignment, kind of the next thing.
Yeah,
is
so that's
put
like
that on the
really-
screen.
Wait, this
Render like a
is
list
like
of,
so
like,
unreadable.
a bunch of blocks.
Well, and I tried to like text wrap it, like, where,
Yeah, so.
yeah, and
I'm
it's
gonna
like,
leave it as an exercise, you're gonna do that, but the hint is it's gonna require
Okay.
everything, it's gonna require some
you're
value.
right, status is
So,
still not very close.
can we, so can we go?
Yeah, for sure.
And then results is its own inside.
We'll have an array of.
And that's.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, like, we should collect it.
Very good.
Yeah, I want to access
Okay.
Very
So these purple things, those are keys, right? And
Serve results.
there's no really bracelets on the outside of them.
Yeah.
They're just like closed.
What? I think it's probably common right in. Then you can do, you have like a, yeah, just, picture right here.
So if you,
So,
okay. So you
like,
got the
that
first
was very
piece there, right?
okay.
I would say
So we
part
copyright,
separate.
whatever.
Okay.
So no results, and then results
If
is
you
nested,
make a cross-origin request, like when you make a, it's only in the web browser.
So I'm getting confused by the structure of
Only what in the web
Well,
browser.
yeah,
the
Cross-origin
API.
request. If you're, example.com, you make a request to create a code.
so the whole response
Or
is
you're on
the
the
entire
page and you make
object,
a
which
request that
includes
your
that
clients,
copyright.
their API. Either way, you're making a cross-origin
Oh,
request.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, you make a request to them, they are going to receive the pre-flight request, so that when you make that cross-origin
like
request, there's that initial request that's made. Remember that diagram from yesterday, where there were two requests that were going on. It's that first pre-flight request that's being made. That's made.
What do you call the
No,
object?
automatic.
The
The browser
response
does
to
it
that?
for you, you can't turn it off. Happens automatically. The
That-
server receives it, the server has the opportunity to
This
say,
is response dot text.
is this request valid at the server?
Right, and then
or the
that would be
client?
the physical object, and you can
Like you want to make a list of all the
the
recent
JavaScript
books.
object.
Let's say,
That's just results.
so you're drawing the tag that you're making that request. It's a cross-origin request. So the browser is going to make an
Here?
request or a
Yeah,
pre-flight
so,
request. The
so
server
you say
we
it's
called
like
it
that
results,
shared the
so
server
you,
is
because you want to
okay.
access,
Oh,
you want to access.
It's going to
I should pick that.
And then
Oh, goodness.
the server might say, oh no, this isn't okay. It's going to return back an error or something with that like access control allow origin thing set back. Think of that as the first section of that top presentation, the presentation slide we had yesterday. The first bit of the pre-flight, the first bit of the whole
I want to parse the text.
If that fails, you just can't make a cross-origin request rather than allow it.
I want to parse the promise even.
Well, because you're getting a response.
Is that helpful?
text, right?
Yeah.
But whatever you're getting back
Okay.
inside your promise. So that's
Yeah,
just
keep track of it. I would say that in general, now that you have this
work.
working, you probably won't have to deal with quarters for the rest of this project. Just kind of go in now. Yeah. Yeah, so you've got an object, and your goal now is to take that object and turn it into a pretty web page somehow. And you can define pretty simple as a bunch of text in a serif font, just like P tags, and that's it. Or pretty, going all out CSS and custom everything. So do whatever.
So I am having some success, but I'm not sure that I am unique.
So yeah, so whatever domain you have, it's
Yeah.
cross-origin, so like, let's
Okay.
say people make.
So this,
decide to make a
this
request,
looks very good. You make a
you
request,
decide whether you want
and
to.
then you attach the promise to it, you attach that then function to it, so it'll run this function when the next request completes. And then you're gonna log out response, that's that.
So like the cross-origin thing.
So that looks good to me. If we go to the network pane here.
So I guess
I'm
it's
just gonna
another
clear this
layer
for
of
you.
security.
Then-
I don't know.
I'm just.
So like they might not understand
Is this? Yeah, this is.
What is?
Just gonna run this one again, just because otherwise we have to like sort through all the requests in the network pane. So I usually like to clear it and then make the request again. And we'll do one. It's kind of nice. I'm gonna do that.
And then
Run
Then I
this.
saw that 200, I got excited. I was like, wait, I did something right.
Yeah, you did do something right. You're on your way here. So.
Obviously, they check my API keys.
To make sure, yeah, so like the course. will
So
check
we're on our way.
whether
We're
they
right there, yeah.
like from wherever you are, and then you know, see whether you're.
Yes,
And if
okay.
that's the
And then
pre-flight.
it'll process, the pre-flight just checks.
So where did you get this URL from?
The actual request that comes to me.
There.
And then I saw some.
It's
The response.
the response, yeah, okay.
Oh, actually, that's not the same thing. but
Yeah,
this
That's
one-
different.
Of course, we'll
Makes
just check to see whether you can make it.
And this
And then
URL,
you'll
we're just
actually
gonna give you
generate.
back just the each.
And then if you have a PID and you're
This is like
authorized,
what the
then
browser
it'll say,
does.
okay, here's.
Browser makes a request, gets back the email, say, this renders our data.
That's where I was,
No, I
like,
don't
I
want
was.
HTML with the page, I want.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of different things.
So- Let's see, did you have another request?
I did, I did, I had to. So, that sounds like a plan.
Yeah, like this one.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is what you want. Like, that's where you started, so that's good. Okay, let's make that one again.
My screaming child is the result.
The JSON, that looks good. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
So here's the network page. Sorry, I zoomed through this stuff super fast. I'm just-
no, I just the networks when you showed them.
But if you click on one of these guys, you get all your details about the request here, and the body here. In this preview or response, we'll give it to you in a less nice way. But, so, I mean, this looks like JSON. This looks like probably something you're familiar with.
That's what I was thinking, I was like, I haven't seen something instead of really zero.
I
And that's what I was
the only one I
used, so.
used.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
it looks cool.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
It's very highlighting of
I actually did it in the
ugly
same way.
comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, similar, but I have a nice
So,
little file.
well, I mean, I guess the thing is, what you're seeing here looks like you got back there.
Right.
Yeah, so that's good.
Mainline disabled.
Stay right here. Well, that's a great question. I'm not actually sure what this object is, but it's something weird. Now,
It's like,
what I can say is,
like to give you the character.
what this
Yeah,
object
it's like
is,
what
will return
Yeah,
from this.
Give me the
They're all
power.
different expressions once you run, it returns.
Like a character creation screen, I'm like, is that what you think?
Exactly. I realized I haven't even played the game
Oh.
and I'm like tired. Like, can't blame.
And then I do like funny things like,
You're doing something
I just like make my,
just, let's do this in
my team, like my staff group,
just because you're a new tab. You don't have to deal with whatever.
yeah, so we'll see like, oh, well, there's
Yeah,
a
that's
team
fine.
of 5.
Okay, so
Oh, well,
you've got
there's
a
my
promise
professor,
professor,
my
normally what you probably use.
the guy that does the glassware, a couple of my lab mates.
Yeah, sure. Go to that.
And it's kind of funny, so like, like biology, so, you know, everybody dies.
No, New York Times, they always return back to the course.
Right, but
They don't always,
but I'm in there too, so.
in all the happy
It
cases,
looked like me.
all the happy cases.
I don't-
You're already
Yeah,
down
yeah.
here, so you don't have to worry about it.
All right.
There are, I've run submissions.
So either
Something else happened.
somebody you're.
The way we work around that is just.
I'll just
once
ask
you
you
go to
really
the
quick.
website, click that.
Yeah,
So that's where it works, that's right. But we're already at that point, so we're just not. Okay. So I would say the next thing is you need to get you need to get this data here in like
Oh, I've
Java
got this
environment
object.
to do something.
And
Does that make sense? Why you do that?
So you.
I need to get it into a JavaScript variable because then I can have the results returned to me.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want with that. The goal of this project, in fact, is to render all that stuff you got back from that request. Or you got back in the response. So if you're gonna do that, have it like, you can't do something with data you don't have. So, yeah, that's really why you need that.
So I
So-
can make the list,
Yeah, so the goal at the very end was like, you got this data, and you want the
Yeah, it was
JSON.
pretty cool.
And then you want to take this JSON object, and you want to create non-elements.
So it's like,
With
oh,
that create element,
do that
the
with
p tag, the p tag, and effectively
generate,
generate that stuff, generate the page, which is gonna get back to this. So what you're gonna get at the very end is something like maybe each one of the tops is Dana's list of books, and then when after this request,
list array right now.
it's going to render something maybe like an unordered list. It's going to have like LIs.
Right, so,
like on a page array.
I just have to create and style my down.
So really, I would do that.
So that part sounds like we got that. The piece we need to do to join this and that, you need to take the response and you set it to a variable. Now, I would say all the information back is in fetch slideshow, the fetch day.
So I'm like looking at.
In particular, there's a slide about how to get the body out of.
So I should ask it, I should look at it. Oh, wait, no, there it is.
Yeah, it was this day. Cool. Go maybe go like 5 or 6 slides forward.
Yeah, we use that.
Stuff like that.
Oh, you're going backwards.
Oh, okay.
So, reprinted their.
Keep going. There we go.
I mean, I didn't even realize.
So that's what you have right now. This was probably pretty
Yeah,
familiar.
so.
Now, you're not here.
Store.
This is how you're surviving.
Oh, okay.
So notice what's different between these two slides. It's in red.
So what I'm doing here is, so this console log.
Well, yeah, I was thinking, so like,
This
you
is
want
actually
when does.
just creating a bar
You want to read.
Okay, so this gave us the status, which was 200. This is actually giving us the total. Yes, and it's putting it into the 2.
Yeah.
Right, so like anything you can like outside of. So you need to define it as.
Well, it sounds like you were getting it, but response.
So that way.
It does. In terms of promise,
So you're already gonna
that
be-
resolves into a string. Just like fetch, but it's a promise in terms of the response.
Oh, wait, no, outside.
But in terms of promise,
The transfer response, and this returns promise 2.
Okay, so that's when
Turns into
like
text.
this gauge.
In terms of
JavaScript, it's just like a bunch of
Yeah, yeah, and then as they.
So, what you have to do is just like this, you have to attach the then to it. You have to say, once it is done working,
Right.
then
Yeah, I don't even know. What to
call this function, and we'll call it the text. And it calls it the text, like that, we can do whatever you want. So I would say,
log out the text, and the text is what appears when I create my document.
So text is what's going to be the body of the document.
I was just thinking.
So text would be, you're ahead of yourself. Yeah. Forgot where it was.
Yeah.
The tab page.
I think it does, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Is going to be.
I don't know. I've definitely seen stuff
So
like
the
that
text
and
is
been
going
like,
to be
oh,
in the body of the response.
Yeah, you wanna know.
The body of the
type
response
object it is.
shows up in the
okay,
console,
what is it?
but I actually wanted
How do
to
you
show
set a variable
up
that's
on my
like
web.
to me, that's not good fun?
Yes.
Or whatever.
on my computer.
Yeah, cool. So if you effectively, if you implement this sort of thing into your fetch example in the console, you get the body out, you log it as text. You're very close to being. So I'm gonna say, work on that, I'll try to get this done. I'll be back down soon enough. Fix that syntax error before it screws anybody else up.
Oh, wait, you said right there.
I deserve a Snickers bar or something. It's like all of that.
All right, feel better. He's done.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that's good. Okay. I'm gonna keep that up there.
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna make a quick announcement here because that whole Mac Plus.
Mhm.
It was fun to be. Excel file with any of, like, anybody else here, or like I would assume any of the teachers. I'll put it in Slack too. So if anybody wants.
Yeah, post it in Slack. I bet you might get some interest.
Well, I know a couple people are here, so I was just gonna say something before I leave.
Yeah.
But I'll put it in Slack too in case like any of you guys wanna kind of try it out for free for however long they're gonna extend it to us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Cause I asked Jesse, and he's like, we don't get out. He's like, you have to ask. We don't get out. Okay, I'll just throw it in Slack and
Yeah.
figure it out. And just throw the emails in an Excel and send it to them and then see, wait for them to do whatever they're gonna do.
Yeah.
But, cool. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, I
that's-
thought it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you think it's useful, other people think it's useful, then go for it.
Yeah.
Especially if they're gonna give it for free, yeah.
Right, because they're like, oh, you know,
Well, really, they wanna get you hooked.
they do,
But,
you know, and I already told him, you know, I know I said to Jeremy, I think I told him, you know, if I was in a position where I was gonna be a web, or an app designer all the time, I would probably buy the lifetime.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
$400 for your lifetime,
yeah.
and you get the updates, whenever they update, it's just automatic, you don't have to do one of them.
Yeah. Cool, well, yeah, feel free to make an announcement.
Yeah, yep, and then I'm office is like, what else?
Yeah.
Can I just talk this through with you?
Yeah,
Because
for sure.
I'm like. All right, so my first thing, let me just say it, and then I'll figure out what it is in this train of thought. So the first thing I'm saying is that there's this response promise, which is going to be equal to the stuff you get back from the fetch request. So now I've got all this data that's in JSON.
It's just a response right now. So
Okay.
it's got like a status code attached to it.
Correct.
It's got some text in the body that you can get access to.
Okay,
And that's a variable response promise here.
so that's what I'm doing. So I
Yeah.
did response promise, and then so this is asynchronous, so that's what I have then. And then function response promise.
I would say that maybe something you're getting a little confused by is the fact that these two variables are doing the same thing. This is a different thing from that.
Okay,
When
what
you try to
is
get something
this? What
different,
is
it's just
it?
like, oh
Probably
my
just like
God.
response would be what I would
There's
call it.
different things.
So in this
I think
case, this is
I
like
think
a
you
wrapped up
just-
version, like you think of this like a present under a
Okay.
Christmas tree. It's like a wrapped up version of the response. And when it then is called, you're like taking and you're unwrapping the wrapping paper off of it.
Okay.
So like the thing inside of the present is
Yeah,
response.
those
The
things that you
present is
said, I think I
response
did that.
promise.
Okay.
In fact, response promise contains response. Oh, wait, you just clicked it.
Your request?
There we go. Okay,
The
so response
original
promise contains
response.
response. There they
Yeah.
are different.
Okay.
What's your URL?
So then I'm just consoling out the
Yeah.
status. This really shouldn't be here, should it? Shouldn't be up here.
No, it doesn't need to be inside of there. So
Yeah, so there's
even
like
though
the
you
Monday
say
days, and then
response promise, response here, but you gotta
very-
update everywhere else that has response promise in it.
Yeah, this is where I'm getting confused. So now console logging.
very
So now this response promise becomes response from now on,
And
Yes.
basically?
At this point, inside of this function, you don't even need to care about response promise anymore. Effectively, you unwrap the present, you don't care about the wrapping paper, you
Okay.
only care about the present.
So response promise is the wrapping.
Yes,
Okay.
or response
Now I
promise
think
is
I'm
like the
ready to
wrapping
do
plus the
this
present.
here.
Okay.
And you unwrapped it so that you just have the present.
Okay, so here I still want promise, but then I want it to be unwrapped, basically.
Yes.
And so now I'm console logging out that status, and now I'm telling it, what is that text is locked up. So now I've got the.
Mhm.
You just typically
Oh, sorry.
data dot result.
So response has some data on it, has a status code, has some other things too. It
Right.
also has a method on it, a function that exists on that response called text.
Uh-huh.
When you run that function text, that function text returns a promise,
Okay.
just like fetch does.
Okay.
Fetch returns a promise, and that promise eventually turns into a response.
Okay.
Response.text.
So you're saying I don't need
returns
it
the
to
promise, and the
print
promise
that out
eventually turns into text.
Okay. So then I console log text.
Yeah, because you're gonna.
And that's what I see in my document.
Exactly.
Because they're
Yeah.
difficult.
All right.
Before that.
So now, what I wanna do.
Yeah. So now,
So now I wanna, like, going back to your slide here, I don't know if there was something that night with that, I think that's what my silence special was for, because I could not grasp anything you were saying. But anyhow,
well,
So
I don't
now-
think we need to do this.
Yeah,
now we're,
So just
what is the next?
You are very, very close here.
Okay.
The only thing is, in this, so when, so you start off, indent your code a little bit better here. So have you done any sort of code indenting, like have you been taught about that at all?
Yeah, and.
Okay. So I would say it comes with experience, and then when you do it, it makes your code a lot easier to understand.
Okay.
It seems like such a trivial thing, matter of
Yeah.
You take lines 11, or 10 and 9, and move them over 2 spaces, or 2 spaces at the beginning of each. Our tab works too, but yeah, just move it over an indentation. And then on line 11. So by doing this now, right, you can see, like, you can see that this function is the outside one, then this function, then this.
So you put the opening bracket, then you tab, and then.
In JavaScript, that's the recommended way to do it. In other languages, but in JavaScript, that's the way. So with this sort of context, you can also see things like if you're using a variable, like if I was using response outside of here, that'd be pretty blatantly obvious, because response is only available inside of this sub here. Anything that uses response has to be indented 2 levels or more.
Okay.
So it sounds like you're maybe. So you're using text here.
Right.
So you're in a place where you have text now, where you were before, you weren't in a context where you had access to the text.
Right.
Sounds like you
Okay.
kind of figured that out.
Okay.
So if you do this now, so you have access to the text you're logging in.
Right.
So now you're running, putting text in JSON that parse.
Right.
You're setting it equal to a variable called response.
Okay, then.
Now, you're reusing variable names here a bit.
Yeah,
Most
that's
likely,
a good idea.
yeah, I would say avoid that.
Alright.
It does make stuff more confusing.
Right.
So pick a new name for that. Maybe like data.
Data, that's what that data.
Stick a bar before that. Good. So now, I mean, can you walk through this now? What you think it's doing?
All right, so now I'm turning the object into a string.
Turn
Or vice
string into
versa,
the
string into the
object. So it's
object, right.
text and being turned into data.
Into data, okay. So now from there, I go back to. It's actually, so now I've got the data and it's going to be an object. And
So what data type is data? Like is data a string? Is it an object? Is it an array?
well, it's gonna be.
Will you stay here and get help? Help you.
You didn't really do any of the JSON. So it's
No, I
probably,
have to
yeah.
go back and do that again.
Where'd you go?
I'm in your
Oh,
seat,
yeah.
aren't I?
Oh, that's fine. I found a really good article that explains things for
Chords?
Yeah.
Great.
So now it makes sense.
Okay, that's great. Great.
Yeah.
Send it to me. I'd love to take a look.
Okay.
I want to know what helps you learn. That would be a good thing to hear.
All right.
All right,
Really
so
helps me.
it's a string that becomes an object.
Exactly. So data or text
Now
is
it's
a
an
string.
object.
I'll
Okay.
put,
Data is an object.
I'm just gonna post in this
Okay.
student.
That works too. So do this, log out data. Whenever I have a data piece of a variable I don't really know what's in it, typically my first course of action is to log it out and see. Just because it's experimental, it's pretty good. So try that.
I forget what the plus was.
So there's our text.
Uh-huh.
We have down there.
Another object.
This is the text.
Right.
This is the parse JSON.
Oh, somebody else.
So click on this guy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like you can go in there and look around. This is an object. So like, this is what you put in a JSON.parse. Here's what you do.
Okay. Pretty cool.
So you got this bottom piece.
All right.
So that's like, you're pretty much through all the module 5 concepts here.
Okay.
So now you have the JSON object. Now you can somehow take that JSON object, you need to make that do things in the DOM.
Right. So I have this piece of code from somewhere else.
Yeah.
But obviously, so now
But right now,
I'm not
you're doing
explaining it, I'm not telling you. The
Yeah.
data is what I want to do with you.
And also, you're doing this all outside of all the promise stuff. Remember how I was saying if you want to use a value, you have to be inside of the function, you have to be in a place where that value exists. Well, code has to be like that.
Okay.
Work. So I would say you're pretty much at where I was hoping you would be in the
Okay.
class.
Okay.
So anything more you've done today is just an extra, which is
Okay.
great.
All right, good.
So keep on going.
So if I move that there, or does it need to be inside both?
It needs to be inside both of them. So you want access to data.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, and fix your inundation too. Yeah,
Oh,
okay. You're good.
Thank you.
Yep. How are you doing? You don't know? Okay, let's chat.
So I think I know what I have to do. It's just getting there.
Yeah, okay.
So I've like written out and I feel like I'm missing steps or I'm just not like actually writing it out correctly.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, so make your technical list for today. We're gonna request to return the results. Parse those results in an array. How was it correct? Yep. Yeah, you got the steps right, that's for sure.
Thompson. No, I think I'm going around either here or here.
Yeah,
And I keep getting random weird things saying like, you can't do that.
okay. Yeah, okay. I think I get roughly what's going on here. So, 1 looks fine to me. That's great. Okay, so 2, take that request and return the results. So what do you expect as an outcome of 2?
Just to be able to like see, oh, there's a list there.
Okay,
Like,
so
so-
let's
some-
print out the JSON, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let me explain to you what I see this code as doing. So you have the bestsellers. Bestsellers is a promise that fetch returns. You're calling .then on bestsellers and giving it a function. And that function takes a single parameter response, and that function is called when the request is called successfully completes. What happens is after that request call or after that fetch call successfully completes, you're logging out 2 things: a string results, and then you're logging out the key results on the object response.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't need that first part.
Well, no, keep that in there. It's good to label those sorts of things. So try this out in a browser. I'm curious to see what the outcome is.
I think I've been through it.
Can you open up that HTML page in your browser? Okay, cool. Try that out. Okay, yeah, response is not defined. Okay. Let's jump back over here.
Right, which is it
Oh.
my function?
I see what's going on. Let's comment on line step 3 for now. Let's just worry about step 1 and step 2. I think that error is coming from step 3. Okay, there we go. That's what I can see. So, result undefined. So what do you know from this? Well, it is running that console.log, seeing results. It's running the code inside of the then. So the fetch is completing, at least. And I guess if you're looking at the network pane, you see 200, that's all good, okay. So that's good.
I have it.
But response.results is undefined. Now, think back to what at the very beginning of the class, when close error messages.
Yeah.
I was talking about how objects, how any key that exists in an object becomes undefined. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, but what I don't understand is how is it not if I can go into the response pane and actually see it?
Yes.
That's where I got results.
Yes. Now, the key difference is the response that comes out of this fetch is not this value. Let me prove that to you. Let me get rid of results here. Let me just log out response. It's this one. Yeah, well, a lot of just random fields, but I mean status. That's
Right,
something
something went
nice.
through.
So you see 200, that's a good thing, and you see 200 here, or here, that's a good thing. So it turns out, if you go back to the slide where I was talking about this in the fetch stuff, there is a way you can get the text of the response from this thing here, response. Now, calling the text of the response body, calling that just concept in general for response is typically kind of an iffy pattern. People often, I mean, just to be more specific, people often say specifically like response body versus just the response, or just like the response. So think of response as some data that represents the whole response. That includes status codes, that includes headers, all that sort of stuff in the response. So if you think back like netcat, you're typing in the request, you're getting back all the text in the response. The response contains all that stuff. So it contains more than just the response body.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes,
Okay.
but I'm still not sure
Yes.
how I can just pull that one little part.
How do you get the response body out of this? Well, there is a method, and I'll let you look in the fetch presentation for more about it, called text on response.
Okay,
Does that ring a bell?
so I have it here.
Ah, yes. Yes, exactly.
So, but, would I just replace this?
You don't have internships.
Well,
Does that still work?
I guess with adding
No,
things
so
that it's not like.
response here has that status code. I mean, you remember before we had response status that existed.
You can find a letter now.
Right.
Also
Even like
exists
nodes
for
for.
text.
And you're
When you
really
run
really
this,
issue.
it's a method. This returns
Not
try?
cool because
just like
I
that
straight copy and paste.
this didn't work before. So we have to use the dot
Oh, yeah.
down. So
Where's the list
fetch
defined?
returns a promise.
Really?
And that promise turns into a response.
Well, I was a little confused.
Response.text returns a promise. And that eventually turns into the text or the body of the response.
Okay.
So what you were doing before is you were taking a response
Keeping
object.
going.
Yeah, you're taking the text. You were
I
taking
know
a
it was,
response.
I was just like,
No. There's a lot of clients that actually do basically what we were trying to do, where they just give you back the body and that's it. It's nice, but it also means like if you forget the headers or status code, you're screwed. But often you need that stuff. So, but anyway, so I would say that copy this. I would say if you take this guy here and basically put this into here,
Yeah.
and just have it instead use bestsellers instead of using get.
I don't know whether it changes
You're probably gonna get some JSON text log guy works great. And then I would say, how from there is that successful? If it's not successful, call me over and we'll through it some more. If that's successful, then just like try doing some stuff with the text. Maybe like JSON, it's gonna be just a string, you gotta turn it into an object for it to do anything.
Right.
Or maybe like try to parse it or something like that. But yeah,
I'll give it a shot.
you're on your way.
Thanks.
Yep, no problem.
We got, then we've got, how are you doing? Oh, well, now we have three. Oh, three. We got sold, and then we have to.
Add like a.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it looks like you have the batch format pretty well done there.
So the result that
I would say, is the request successful for you?
Then
No, okay. Kind of response here.
like you scroll.
So I would say that, remember I was talking about really how it was like, it was a try thing, you can try out the API on the documentation. This page has one of those, and it's a little bit hidden.
Go like, so that text results and then lists. Here's top, wait a second.
Oh, and there's results.
Okay. What's in this?
And then lists. Oh, there it is.
No.
Listen, have you seen that thing before?
Has the
I don't know
array
if
that I want.
Okay.
I thought.
Okay, well, you got that,
Yeah,
okay,
what
so you
is
got
that?
that to work, that's
So
good.
I'm getting back empty. Is that an empty array?
There is something, so
There's 16
typically
things.
what the pattern
And there's
is, something
something
is very well done. Thing is though, this API documentation has some holes, not quite perfect. With a good API documentation, you can almost always do what you're doing in the voice file. What I would recommend, this will kind of, once you get past this point, and like, it's just, the rest of it sounds, it seems like you probably got
Oh.
it. Turning it
You want to
into
head out,
something
that's fine.
pretty much
Sorry,
like.
that's all.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna put this in the bottom, just so that.
If you wanna head out,
the same kind of space.
Small
So
side.
that I want you
This is
to,
really hardcovers only or something.
make a request of this guy like you did
Oh, my
before.
bestsellers, that's like API. Oh, I guess not.
Put in the data that you put in before, the button you click on.
Okay, I guess it's just general. Right, I'm gonna say I'm using a different list. Okay, that's why. I'm using bestseller.
And I, so you did say you can use a bestseller input top 5.
Do you recall, anytime you make a request, you let browser see it. This makes a request,
I think it's
trying out the
getting-
API in the
Gives you back
browser.
different.
Everything,
So-
right, yeah. So if
It
you-
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like which one you use, right?
Yeah. I guess
So if you copy this in your chat sheet, like copy the URL, copy the method, copy all this stuff, then you're gonna have all the right information.
Probably
And
that's all.
the browser's already made it successfully, so like it should work. So I'd say give that a try. And you'll see as you do this, it's something like that for documentation. And if you're really feeling adventurous, you just want to dig deep and find it, but it's hidden.
Okay.
So
Oh, sorry.
give it a try. This is
if I write
what
it,
you had. You're pretty much gonna have a
Process.
So
you're
getting
doing
into
quite
my
well.
ceramic
Is that helpful? Okay. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
No, I just write, I mean, I write things that I look back and anyway, but at the slide,
This that book.
it just
No.
helps me.
This is that book. Okay.
yeah.
Focus
Let's go.
on
Actually, you probably wanna do it
what
for
God
each.
was saying. If I just listen.
For each 2 boilers, right? They were with their- Each
Well-
section, it's just the display name. for it.
I think that, okay, yeah,
So
so
they give you
what's the error you're getting?
list
Okay,
names,
any error.
they're each different lists, right? So like your first, list name can be nonfiction,
Oh.
so, yeah. So for each one, you wanna specify, so
Oh, I didn't draw it.
let's do for the,
That's weird.
Oh, what a mess.
yeah, a little bit.
Why are you doing this? 324.
So then we'll especially do
Yeah.
this one, this, okay,
Oh, it should be, you're right, yeah.
it should be empty, so not.
That, you do that.
So there are 5 books.
And that one. So they all-
Yeah,
they do
yeah,
it.
that- we talked about this earlier.
They all have that, include the-
You cannot read something
They
undefined.
Oh.
Books again. We've got 5 more books.
Okay. There's
So
a
what,
one list
from
that
that error,
carries
you got, we
each
were talking
list,
about earlier.
and then for each
Do you have
list,
any
you're
guesses
going to
what's
have
up?
it walk through the first 5. Which I think was probably.
There's no results in Seattle.
So first I gotta figure out how to get the loop in the list.
Where are you defining, where is, what's, what you're doing here, this expression? You're getting stuff out of data. Where have you defined data?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Well, this isn't.
Okay,
This
you're
isn't
wrong,
wrong.
clever.
Move through
Well,
the.
let's, I don't know.
Yeah, well, no, I like the way you're thinking, it's just.
I was hoping it was this one.
Oh, no, see, so it
That's why it's
doesn't
not gonna
know
work.
right here. So you have to be
That's a
pointing
function.
to something.
This is
Oh,
the
okay.
right.
Right, so it would be,
Okay, so
you want to put with your making.
what might be helpful is put a console.log down here.
Or just hold it with.
Console.log. I'm gonna call the DOM operations. That log is gonna happen when the DOM operations happen. And then here, I'm going to put a
Here.
console.log of something like text from.
Like in general.
Yeah.
Decoded.
It just made the like, you know.
So that way, well, like, just adding a
Okay,
few logs,
we're good.
shouldn't change anything the program's doing. But,
Can you share anything?
everything's open.
Sit down one impressions.
Oh, there it is, okay. Okay, cool, yes, reload it. Now, what I want you to notice is, scroll to the top. 3% DOM operations, see that log first.
3%.
Am I on 3%?
I was, no,
no,
it was close.
Give me one second, what am I on?
Yeah, seriously.
Get the die again.
Okay, cool.
I'm on
Yeah.
30. Okay, I'm fine.
Literally,
I
every
would go
single
back.
time I
So
have
just
to plug my
check
computer in,
and
it's
see
dying.
Actually reference point. So yeah.
Sorry about that.
Here it's labeled and the pointing
So,
is empty, right?
well, DOM
Really
operations
doesn't
log
actually
first,
going through
and
anything, so.
then,
It's a,
technically
what you're
response decoded as log second.
counting to,
You know why that is?
so what's the length instead of to be. So let's do it, you don't have to. Actually, let's probably more accurate.
Yeah.
Very long.
So this starts, kicks off the request and it runs this, and then this comes back and runs this.
Data dot.
Like, put this.
Now, you might, just to fully close this, why are you getting the error you were getting? Well, when you do something like left data,
Okay, so you don't
by
want to
default,
put your.
that defines data, but it sets it equal to
Right,
undefined.
but here you want to just change.
Remember,
Right now.
you can't get fields in undefined as though they're before. So if you think of this as being undefined dot results, you're gonna get,
Wait, so we want the variable called this.
you cannot read property results of undefined.
So let's, so let's.
So the data dot result dot list.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just whenever you do asynchronous
So
operations.
this sort of stuff
You have to
really,
put every- you have to-
like, I don't
You
know.
can't break out of that.
Anyway,
You
it's
gotta
just
keep
like.
everything inside. That's just the way to do it.
Right.
And yeah, your code's gonna start going over that, going over the left pretty far, like especially if you have a lot of multiple.
Oh, this one.
See already, like, you're starting to go over it. And imagine you have like 3 or 4 levels deep,
Oh,
starting to go that way.
So you can just be called.
There are some ways to alleviate that, but for all intents and purposes, right now, you just gotta deal with it. So, give that a try. I bet you're
I
gonna
wanna
have some
call it
luck.
this with an S. Do I just want to call it that?
But you do have to change the old
So,
image so that.
you're walking away.
Same object here.
All right, cool. Was it like,
So, the intro
Mine
is
stopped
syntax
there.
again.
There.
Gotten that far, but
okay,
something's still.
Yeah,
okay,
okay,
that's great.
promise up that. Okay, so you got that, you got your text.
sheet. And.
Yes, okay, I see what's going on here. So,
You.
made your fetch, stored that with a promise.
Okay.
You had the promise, you called that down on it, right, and then you got the response out of the promise. So this is like the response that came out of that promise.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Does that help?
No, it's not changing things. Okay, so then we're gonna call response.text. So we're gonna call this on response. We're gonna get a second promise. That second promise is gonna give us back, gonna resolve to the text side of the body of the request. This sounds like you already, this already makes sense, it's already kind of good. Okay, so you got that, then what you're gonna do,
Oh, okay.
inside of here, you're gonna go promise to that event. So once the text from the body comes back, you're gonna call this function here. And when you
call that function is going to take parameter of text, and you pass in to get the text. You're going to log out that text. Okay, so you're going to do that. Then afterwards, well, not. Yeah, we can say afterwards. So after this runs, you're going to have you're going to create a new dump, you're going to create a new H1. Then you're going to, yeah, that's fine. You're going to do some styling on it. You're going to set the inner HTML equal to response.text. You're going to append that dump. What is response.text equal to?
Promise to.
That's when you run it, it's equal to promise to. But so you call response.text, or you assign that equal to promise to. Now, if you just
So I have to pass to.
Not for the
in fact, promise to is you like. I was using this analogy with Eva, I think might be helpful with you. Think of promise to as a present. When you call then, the thing you get back here, the text, that's like the unwrapped present. That's like the thing inside of the present. The promise to is like the present, the wrapping paper with the present inside. So what you're doing here, response.text is a function that returns the present.
Okay. All right. So this is like the delivery.
Yeah. So the delivery man is this. And when you,
Okay. So I don't have to do that.
yeah.
The text.
You want the text. So what would you put there to make that work?
Oh my God.
Just text. Yeah, do it.
Okay.
Now, there's one other issue. I'm gonna save it and move it in the browser. I want to see if you can get a stack trace.
Oh my God.
Oh, what is
I'm
happening?
guessing you're probably
No,
gonna
no,
see.
you need to be calling it in the
No, we're not.
somewhere.
Okay.
That's just funny.
Yeah, it's absolutely hilarious. Maybe I just like copied this stuff and sent it to him and he knew that he was supposed to call it to make it work.
Wait, so he wants these
Open this
projects
in
done by
Chrome.
tomorrow?
Sure.
I don't know.
Probably have a bunch of tabs open. You want to avoid more
No,
stuff.
this is easier for me to command tab to go back and forth and just keep clicking on.
Then if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna go to ways and.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
No.
Give me one moment.
I know, this is just a quick question. Do you want this done by tomorrow morning or
After, at the end of class.
at the end of?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you call a function, right?
So yeah, I want to go, but I want to also get the
Development.
development while it's clear on my.
By default, Safari has to go down to here.
It's just like
So I
building
think I did that. It's really
Yeah, I don't know.
I just wanted to see that.
Earlier.
They have.
I tried to say like 25.
I got the wrong size.
Let's reload
Actually, you
that.
won't see anything.
There we go. Okay. Undefined variable text. That's together.
Also true.
So,
I should
Like you
get
should be
my.
getting, yeah.
In the div.
variable text is not defined. Why is the variable text not defined?
Okay.
We're talking about this text right here.
So funny.
Well, where is text defined? Where is the variable text initialized?
Even if it's.
Run the whole jam.
Yes.
We're like, I just got the scratch.
So,
You don't gotta go back.
in this function, you define this variable text. You're logging that out. Then after this function returns, that variable text is thrown away. It's gone. When you define a variable in a function, you don't define it with all scopes above that. You only define it within the context of that function. That's why, for example, this stuff, this responsive function, stuff is inside of this function. If it was outside the function,
Oh,
screw that, but you just wouldn't have, like, the response value wouldn't be defined. So you wouldn't be able to actually say this stuff from the response. So it would be kind of like purposeful, or purposeless, I guess. So using that sort of principle with this code down
So
here.
the function begins here.
And here it goes down to that.
Literally just straight.
This function against there, it's there. Given that you want to do some stuff using text, where do you have to put this code so that
Right? Nobody said it. Who would say,
where is text defined?
I'm like, it's the shop or French. Now it's featured.
So if you want to do something with text, you want to use that value. Where do you have to put your code that uses that value?
The code that uses that value has to be within bar.
It's within the function.
Not.
But it is. within bar.
This code
Mhm.
is within this function.
So I'd have to get rid of that.
Get rid, define
I
that.
have to get rid of.
Oh.
Well, now, so yes and no. So by doing that, you don't have matching parentheses and curly braces. But in principle, yeah, like you want this stuff here.
Yeah.
You want this stuff here to be inside of here. Because this inside of here is the only place text is defined. So you need to use text here. So if you had it down here,
And if you can't see this.
once this function returns and like goes out of scope, text is no longer defined. Like it's not
Right, because it's part of this and then it detaches from there.
exactly.
And
You
so,
Ready. You can check out.
No, it's not quite. Let me do the change for you, and I think that might help tie it together. Take this here. I'm gonna move it inside here. It's under indentation. So what did I do there? Well, I put this in here because this is where text is defined. Wow. We want to use text here when we set the inner HTML element. The only place text is defined is inside of this function. Yes. If you were to try to use text down here, like if I try to do something
so I
like,
took it outside of the function.
yeah,
So that's why when I took it into this, it was, you said it was kind of right. So
yeah, you're right on the right track. Let me do a little demo that might help explain this as well. So I make a function. To show you.
Well, I understand it because it's just a matter of where the function begins.
Yeah.
And so you just have to make sure that everything that it begins and it ends on instead of matching parentheses.
Exactly. So like if I have this function foo, I run foo, right, and I give it like a value of that to log out one, and you expect it. But now if I try to log out,
And this is fun, this is like other textures around.
text is defined inside of this function.
Yeah.
Some sort of thing. Imagine the same thing with text. Wow, losing my voice. This is good. Too much talking today.
And the console log can be.
Well,
Good night.
this is not valid. If you had,
Right.
yeah. So if I want to use text, I always have to be within this function. So that's where text is. If I want to use response, I always have to be inside of this function. So that's where response is.
Okay.
If I try to use the response outside of here, the response is not going to, it's going to be undefined, or it's going to complain.
Yeah.
Exactly. Try that out.
Your damn lipstick, Bradley, wherever it has to.
There it is.
Even wear makeup.
Yeah, okay. I do know what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say-
I was on the right track.
Yeah, take a maybe a Google for scoping. That's going to be a word you could look at to learn more about this stuff. You're
I like that.
each time, like each time though, you've been very, very close. Like, you
Yeah,
have the
yeah,
code
I get
right,
it.
all except for
Yeah,
one little thing.
yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, when there's like, it starts to be more than one.
Yes.
I grabbed the script.
What do you think about the lesson today? Okay. What do you think about that exercise? That project in general? Okay. I realized after I did it for the other that it was not a great idea. That's what it was.
569.
Yeah.
it's good to expose people to hard things, but I think as a first thing, it maybe was not the best choice. So if I teach this module again, I'll definitely adjust. But yeah. But
And not say I wasn't trying.
API is not too bad. The documentation really was hard. Documentation's not super complete. It's not very standard.
Okay. Well, we're good.
I mean, you can figure it out, or like I can figure it out pretty quickly. I've done this stuff a lot, but I made it this judgment. Okay, that's. I think that's good stuff. Other than that, yeah. I think I'm gonna write something about writing. I agree with your point earlier that that's a pretty important skill. That's not something that's super good for them yet, but it's very important. So maybe the color today. Yeah, good point. But I guess is there anything in particular that you think I've missed that's like very important?
These guys?
Okay. There's some soft skills like this stuff that I didn't cover, but there were a lot of fun usually stuff that I talked really well about. I think they're probably more qualified to talk about that stuff than I am.
For the first one, like an 8 either, I don't know, maybe it's a different.
Yeah, but they have a pretty big tech department. I work with a couple people who used to work there. So they have the main engineering guy.
Creates one every time.
Came over last Thursday, I think, did mock interviews. So basically like just go into a room with him and that's what I see here. Yeah,
So when I ran this before,
I feel like
they're
able
would
to
make
do a lot of
this
stuff
be
more than
complete
I
this
ever.
every time I get after.
I got the rough
But I
idea,
can't do
but
this.
like, it was like so 20 years or something. So, yeah, that was good.
There was a fun time of like, okay,
If you
let's
have anything
create
you want to work on, don't hesitate.
the div, but then not the UL. And then it would create the div, the UL, but then not add the allies to the UL.
No,
And that's
I
what
don't think so. I've
right now. It's not adding the allies to the UL.
Got two things that I want to do, stuff on making documentation, right? And also,
Get LMP, Cleveland.
you guys said, George Joey. Yeah.
Maybe you
Like
add-
refresh the page, clear all that.
Yeah. If you think of anything, we can do it together.
If it's creating multiple tabs.
They're not very close to networking stuff, like they're all in context with other things. I think one of the kind of the challenges throughout this module, I'm trying to figure out what I can talk about that relates to that doesn't tie into server stuff quite right. Yeah. So I'd say that there isn't, I think it's a Coursera course, I looked at some of this, if they're inspiring, but I'll mention that. But I feel like, it's free, yeah, it's not super long, it's like, you feel like an hour or two. And it pretty much just goes over a lot of the same stuff, just in a brief version of this course, this module. That's a good point, yeah.
They want to learn something else, they will go Coursera as they get closer to.
Yeah, for sure.
Alright, well, let's check the div.
Cool. Well,
There's things in there.
it's been good.
Yeah,
So you're
gone.
here tomorrow as well, or?
That's it.
Oh, okay.
We're good.
So this is your last day?
Staying.
See if I can-
Running away.
Yeah,
Something else.
if you're around or you're available,
Although we're still not quite there.
You have to do another
I think I've got
version of it, I guess.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
you were saying
yeah,
earlier.
too. Yeah, I think the next one,
Yeah.
I think it's in 2 weeks. Is it, yeah.
Actually, probably do it in
Second Tuesday. So the second Tuesday is open after, the third Tuesday is Gaus. Yeah, and if you go to the coworkers website or the coworkers meetup,
You will
have
for each
it.
one.
But yeah, if you want to more involved for the song, maybe easier to do that.
For each thing.
For that.
Oh, because there's a big group of 5 and the.
You're thinking, yeah, I'm thinking like UL with 5
I'll try and
items,
come tomorrow.
Sure.
and then the UL for the
Yeah.
other,
Yes, yeah.
cover, whatever the heck, whatever heck each one says.
Sounds like you guys are into it. I don't want to interrupt you, but everything going well?
It was struggle.
A little struggle?
Yeah. But, you know, success in struggling.
Oh, okay. I like it.
It gives us back some weird stuff though, like, not the actual book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize because I was using the best photos one, so like I was like, why do you not have book objects like up top?
And then in there, and then inside there,
Yeah,
and then
okay.
inside there. There goes some books.
Yeah, there are some
So I have a
books.
question on when it says that way. I'm mistaken if with like a JSON object, if you just get the result and it's an array,
Mhm.
is it having an issue seeing that? Do you need to put brackets around it or something?
Where are you talking about?
So like in the create list function, it passes the list of lists, which is 16, and this doesn't seem to have an issue with saying it's a blank 16, but I think it's saying that there's an error. Yeah, I had a problem.
Here we
Every
go.
property line is undefined.
Okay.
Unless it's sitting. Oh wait, actually, I think it's
Okay.
I realized there's
List,
no,
so
I
that,
just realized there's passing nothing.
oh, yeah, list is undefined.
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
That
Yeah,
was before I changed it. Okay, never mind.
cool. We're gonna talk about stack traces tomorrow. You probably know all that stuff already.
Okay.
But if you run into an error, a little tiny link on the right side, of that, click on that, it'll tell you a line of code. If you don't know that already.
Oh,
We're gonna
okay,
talk
so
all
you're
that
not the TA?
I am the TA.
Oh, you are.
I mean,
Okay.
so it was math.
All right,
That
never mind.
didn't
So
know what list I was asking about.
list was undefined. So remember, you cannot read property something is undefined with that sort of type of error.
I'll pick up a little.
Yeah, sounds good. See you tomorrow.
See you later.
So just like you were talking about before, list, like that sort of error means that you're trying to access a property on a value that's undefined.
Mhm.
List is undefined. Well, list is there, okay. Where are you calling this function? Call this function down here.
Excuse me, are you a TA also? Are you a, I have a question.
Sorry, I stole
No, it's okay.
you from,
I'm trying to.
got create list here.
Like when I
Notice how
dig
create list
around
doesn't have
now,
any parameters in it.
how I can create one.
So this is a kind of an interesting situation we have not run into yet.
Mm.
You've got a function,
Uh-huh.
you're calling it with no parameters, but you have a parameter up there.
Okay. So should I have left that empty up there and
Well-
called it with parameters below?
Call it.
But every time I don't know.
Okay, so there's a couple different things you can do here. So this is valid JavaScript. In fact, a lot of things rely on this function, this feature, and it's kind of a backwards feature. If you have a function,
This was like a general thing that I had from something else. And I'm like, okay, here goes my unordered list making machine.
okay, yeah. I like unordered list making machines. That's a good thing to
So
have.
this is what I have.
Cool, okay.
And what I'm
So,
gonna
I mean,
do
it makes
is
sense. You have an
it's
unordered list
really
making machine and it
result
accepts as a
that
parameter a list
I
of
don't mind.
data to make an unordered list out of.
Right.
And I'm
So,
trying
to me,
figure out the
So
best
here
way
it should be
to
empty.
do that, and I'm
Well,
wondering-
Here, it makes sense to have the parameter here in the function.
Oh,
Because you're calling this, you need to give it that, I mean, if you don't give it a list of stuff to make the unordered list out of, how's it gonna do anything?
Right.
It's like asking someone a question and not giving them all the data for them to give you the answer.
Mhm.
But if you're gonna do that, you need to somehow give something to the function. Like you're not specifying a list down here, but you're expecting a list up here.
Right.
And it turns out this is valid JavaScript. In this case, list is equal to undefined. Just a rule, if you have parameters in a function, and you call that function and don't specify those parameters when you call it, any parameters you don't specify are equal to undefined. Do you want me to say that again?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do a little better demo here too while we're at it. How to make a function
It's supposed to say
pass.
purple. This is
That's
purple.
going to take A, B, and C. I'm going to log out A, B, and C. Something like that. That makes sense. If I call the test with 1, 2, 3, get 1, 2, 3,
So you want to create your
that should not be a surprise. Okay. I'm going to call test like this now. What do you think I'm gonna get?
Do you remember,
Okay,
it's gonna be
so
about
I wanna
that.
say like for
Didn't define.
each
Think we're gonna get an error?
one, and I actually just saw the.
I mean,
Or, oh, an error would be different than undefined.
it would be. What do you, just take a guess. What do you think's gonna happen?
I like undefined. Let's
Okay.
go. A lot of undefined.
A lot of undefined. Well, let me try this. Let me-
Undefined 3 times.
And I guess we do a 1, only a 1.
Mm-hmm.
1 undefined.
But I did see
Oh.
what you were just talking about.
We do a 2. What do you think's gonna happen if I put a 2 in here?
So you did it. So it's like, oh, you gave me space for 3 parameters. You only gave me 1. I'll take that 1 and give you back undefined for the other 2.
Yeah. So with this, what do you think I'm gonna get?
So we should get 1, 2, and then undefined.
There you go.
And then undefined.
Well, to the
It's
undefined.
extra undefined. This is what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. Like, you got the right answer,
Yep.
and then it's undefined again.
This extra undefined, ignore it. You're gonna see it in a lot of different places. It's on a separate line. With this effectively, it's kind of misleading. Yeah, just ignore it. I maybe I'll do a lesson tomorrow on why exactly that's there. But there's a story involved.
Okay.
But yeah, this is the
I guess
answer.
that's exactly what I mean by like, you got the right answer and you got undefined.
Yeah. Yeah, don't worry about that second undefined. If you just see 2 undefineds in a row like that, or you see a value in an undefined, see the correct answer undefined, forget that second undefined exists.
Okay.
In fact, see that little less
The
than
dot,
with the
the
dot?
arrow, yeah.
That like you see that and that just means ignore that line.
Oh.
That's like the little thing you should key
I
into.
love ignoring things. Okay.
Yeah.
I will be all about it.
Or also, if you really want to make it look different, crumple that log thing instead of just typing them like I did. Okay, well that's really gonna make it even more confusing. Never mind. Okay, well,
That's really funny.
so I guess I'm guessing what I'm, yeah, so you need to put list in there. If you save that, probably something's gonna happen.
Okay.
But I don't know where Katie went, but it sounds like she
Went
was.
to the ladies' room.
Okay.
Yeah, and I need to do similar. But what I should do is send you what I have.
Yeah, so don't worry about doing that right now. I'm gonna make the assignment on Google Classroom tonight or tomorrow morning or something like that. Before class tomorrow.
All right.
And just my hope is we're gonna go do some lessons, got a couple things to present, and the rest of the class is just gonna be like this. The goal is to finish this up.
Yeah.
And you are quite close.
Dude, legit, I don't know what. Okay, so I used to go to yoga like every day. And like some days I'd go in there and it'd be like, I would just like murder it. And other days it would be like, have I ever been to this class before?
Yep.
I'm like, Jesus Christ.
That's normal.
Yeah.
With software.
Yeah?
I've had a couple, like,
So you come in one day and you're just like deadlifting everything, and then the next
Yeah.
day you're like, I can't lift a feather.
you wonder why some days I'm a lot better explaining things than others.
Oh.
It happens to me too.
Yeah?
Yeah. Actually, at work today, I was incredibly tired and being like, oh my gosh, I've got to teach this class.
Yeah.
How am I going to do it?
For real.
And it turns out that when I just start talking, I immediately start waking up. It's
Yeah.
a very weird thing.
Nice.
It's like I have to do work and I'm exercising. It's like I'm waking up because I'm exercising my mouth.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so
Yeah.
I get it. I totally get it.
Right, like I don't know. There have definitely been days that I'm like, you're here with me and I'm not here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I will say that at some point, you'll get to a point where some simple stuff, and you might actually already be there with HTML, where like you don't even have to think about that stuff anymore. It just kind of happens.
Yeah. That'd be nice.
You'll get to that point with this stuff,
Ooh.
and that's a really exciting point.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, because the stuff that becomes challenging is the sort of base level stuff. You can just kind of do whenever, and it becomes that what you really should look for in a job is a job where the base level stuff is what you're expected to do, and the sort of stuff you have to think about is the sort of stuff that you maybe is like the challenging stuff you can do occasionally, because
If
then
you're
you know
reaching every day.
yeah, you
like,
shouldn't be in
that's
this.
hard.
Yeah, because you're going to get tired. You're going to come home and be exhausted. And if you have a bad day or a day where you just don't want to do stuff, like it's going to be a hard day for you.
Right.
So, I mean, of course, that's a perfect world, but
This is true.
that's where it would be great for you to be, or for
Yeah.
anyone to really be.
Right. Right. Yeah. Starting to get to that point at my job now, but like, whatever.
Yep, I'm just gonna close my computer here, just because I don't want to.
She set me on the right track. I asked her, she said, okay.
Yeah.
Just